Life has a quiet way of restoring what others tried to take. Sometimes the blessing arrives through the door they slammed shut. The chandeliers inside the Hamilton Regency ballroom glittered like a sky filled with diamonds, catching reflections off crystal glasses and sequined gowns. The annual DC International Philanthropy Gala wasn't just another charity event. It was a power arena where reputations were strengthened, alliances formed, and careers shifted with a handshake. But on this particular night, something far more attention-shifting happened, because the moment Zaida Morrow stepped through the entrance, the room stopped breathing. Not gradually, subtly. Immediately, a wall of whispers rippled through the ballroom, like a tide sweeping across polished floors. That her? No way. Zaida Morrow. Here? Wait. She's pregnant. My goodness. Isn't she Caspian Hale's ex-wife? And she's standing with, oh Lord, Rhett Harrington. Phones lowered, glasses paused halfway to lips. Socialites who spent decades training their faces to remain unreadable suddenly dropped their masks. Because Zaida, poised and striking in a silk gown that embraced the fullness of her expectant form, walked beside Rhett Harrington, one of the most powerful and impeccably composed figures in the East Coast corporate sphere. She did not cling to him. She did not shrink behind him. She simply walked at his side, as if she belonged there. Rhett's hand rested lightly at the small of her back, a gesture faint enough to be polite, but intentional enough to declare something louder than words. She is with me. He didn't smile. He didn't show off. He simply offered a calm nod to the room while staying fully attuned to Zaida, as if her comfort outweighed every camera, every whisper, every pair of eyes tracking them. Zaida kept her composure, but her pulse fluttered beneath her skin. It was her first major appearance since her very public divorce. Her first time stepping into this level of scrutiny while carrying a child. Her first time entering a room where half the attendees knew her story, or at least the version Caspian had allowed them to hear. Still, she held her posture. She inhaled slowly, and she moved with the quiet dignity that had always been her armor. The murmurs grew sharper. She's glowing. Look at Harrington. He's protective. Wait until Caspian sees this. As if summoned by the words, a shift rippled through the crowd near the far end of the ballroom. A cluster of guests parted instinctively, and a tall man in a tailored charcoal suit stepped into view. Caspian Hale, sharp-featured, controlled, every inch the polished DC power player he prided himself on being. His eyes found Zaida instantly, the man who had once dismissed her without hesitation, the man who claimed she could never carry a child, the man whose betrayal she had survived. His expression, usually unreadable, cracked just for a fraction of a second. It was enough, a faint tightening around the jaw, a flicker of disbelief, a flash of something that teetered between shock and bruised ego, because the sight before him was undeniable. Zaida, his ex-wife, radiant, expecting, unbroken, standing beside the one man Caspian had spent years trying to outmaneuver. Rhett Harrington. The tension in the room sharpened. Rhett noticed Caspian approach from across the ballroom. His posture straightened, subtle yet unmistakable, a shift that communicated readiness rather than hostility. He moved half a step closer to Zaida, not blocking her, not shielding her, but creating a presence beside her so solid that even the whispers seemed to retreat. Zaida felt his nearness, felt the comfort in it, felt her lungs settle, even as her heart thudded. Caspian reached them with a practiced smile that didn't touch his eyes. Well, he said quietly, though the air carried his words farther than he intended. This, unexpected. Zaida's fingers twitched, just slightly, but she didn't falter. Her spine stayed straight, her chin level, her breath steady. Rhett didn't speak yet. He simply observed Caspian with a steady look, a look that invited truth, but offered no patience for games. Guests around them pretended to chat while shamelessly listening in. The opening moment had landed. The room was hooked. The story had begun. Caspian's smile remained tight, but his eyes scanned Zaida's form, stopping exactly where he meant them to, on her stomach, on the unmistakable curve that confirmed what the entire ballroom was whispering about. His expression twitched, a flash of disbelief, a flicker of wounded pride. Not grief, pride. Pregnant? He murmured under his breath, though he made sure his voice carried. That's how it is now. Zaida held his gaze, calm. She owed him no explanation, no justification, not after everything he had done. But Caspian didn't look at her for real clarity. He looked at Rhett. "This must be quite the surprise for you, Harrington," Caspian said, his tone smooth, enough to fool a stranger, but sharp enough to cut anyone who knew him well. "Unless she told you what the doctors told us." Zaida's breath tightened. Rhett's posture shifted, just a fraction, enough for her to feel the steadiness in him. Caspian's voice rose slightly as more guests drifted closer, pretending to sip drinks while shamelessly eavesdropping. "She didn't tell you she was diagnosed as highly unlikely to conceive during our marriage." He tilted his head, feigning sympathy. "I suppose some men don't ask the right questions." The words sliced through the air. A few gasps sparked. Someone whispered, "That's too far." Another murmured, "Why would he say that here?" Zaida's fingers curled softly around the silk of her gown, but she did not step back. Not this time. Not ever again, because of him. Rhett's voice entered the space with a quiet authority that snapped every listening head in his direction. "Caspian." He said the name like a warning, but without raising his tone. "You're speaking loudly for a man who hasn't considered the possibility that he might simply have been the wrong husband." The crowd froze. A few people choked on their drinks. A hand flew to someone's mouth in silent shock. This wasn't the Rhett Harrington people we're used to. Measured, polished, controlled. This was a man choosing a side. Zaida's heart pressed against her ribs. Rhett wasn't defending her out of pity, or ego, or spectacle. He was defending her because he understood that words could break a woman long before actions ever did, and he refused to let Caspian rewrite her truth in front of an audience. Caspian stiffened, the mask slipping for the first time. "Oh?" he replied, softly, jaw tightening. "Is that your angle? That my marriage failed because I wasn't suitable?" Rhett held his gaze with calm precision. "Your marriage failed because you treated your wife like a tool instead of a partner." A shiver of tension fluttered through the onlookers. Zaida felt her breath catch, not from fear, but from recognition. Someone finally said the words she had carried silently for so long. Caspian stepped closer, ignoring Rhett entirely now. His eyes locked on Zaida. "So tell me," he said, voice low but sharp enough to command the entire ballroom's attention. "Did you ever consider telling him the truth? That you couldn't give me a child?" Zaida inhaled slowly, a breath of restraint, not weakness. Before she could speak, Rhett placed a hand gently at her back. "Enough." The firmness in his tone created a boundary Caspian could not cross. "Whatever you believed about her was your limitation, not hers." Murmurs erupted again. Zaida's hand trembled slightly, not from fear, not from shame, but from the unexpected sensation of being protected without being diminished. She didn't step back. She didn't fold. She simply met Caspian's stare and said quietly, "You don't get to define my story anymore." Security approached cautiously, sensing the rising tension. Guests parted like the ballroom itself understood the weight of this moment. Rhett didn't touch Caspian, didn't threaten him, didn't posture. He simply said, with a voice steady enough to silence the whole room, "She is no longer yours to talk about or talk down to." Caspian's jaw flexed, his pride bruised his carefully curated image crumbling in front of an audience that once admired him. And the truth settled heavily into the space. Zaida Morrow, the woman he discarded, had risen in ways he never anticipated, and Rhett Harrington stood beside her, not out of pity, but out of choice. A hush settled across the ballroom, the kind that happens when a moment cuts deeper than expected, touching nerves people didn't even know were exposed. For a second, it wasn't about Zaida, or Rhett, or even Caspian. It was about every person who had ever been dismissed, every heart that had ever been thrown away, every life someone tried to define with a single cruel sentence. Zaida stood tall beneath the crystal lights, but what the guests saw in her wasn't just confidence. It was a question reflected back at them, a question many weren't prepared to face, because everyone in that room knew someone, or had been someone, who loved deeply, trusted completely, and got wounded for it. A woman near the bar whispered, "I know that pain." A man behind a column murmured, "My ex-wife did the same thing to me." The story unfolding before them touched something shared, something human. And if Zaida could have spoken to every viewer watching this video right now, her eyes alone would ask them, have you ever been thrown away by someone who was supposed to love you? Have you ever poured yourself into a relationship only to be discarded when you weren't convenient anymore? Have you ever been told you weren't enough, not smart enough, not beautiful enough, not accomplished enough, not valuable enough, only to rise higher than they ever believed you could? Zaida's silence carried another question too, a deeper one. Has someone ever tried to define your future and been dead wrong? Because Caspian didn't just leave her. He didn't just betray her. He declared her future incapable of holding joy. He spoke finality into something that was never final. Yet here she stood, glowing with life, standing beside a man who saw her worth without condition. Every viewer watching this story knows a moment like this. When someone underestimated them, when someone's doubt nearly broke them, when life surprised them in a way the hurtful person never imagined. Rhett glanced at Zaida with subtle reassurance, a quiet look that said she didn't owe this crowd a performance. She didn't owe Caspian an explanation. Her truth was already speaking for itself. The ballroom felt charged, not with chaos, not with scandal, but with a collective understanding. Everyone has been hurt. Everyone has been misjudged. Everyone has carried a wound no one else could see. Zaida's presence tonight wasn't just dramatic. It was relatable. Because the moment someone tries to define your destiny, life has a way of rewriting the story. The crowd slowly regained its breath, but the energy in the ballroom had shifted, not just because of the confrontation, but because something deeper was finally visible. The real conflict had nothing to do with the pregnancy, and everything to do with what it represented. Zaida Morrow was not just a woman standing between two powerful men. She was the living proof that a truth Caspian once spoke with confidence had been wrong, harmfully wrong, publicly wrong, personally wrong. The entire room now understood the weight of that mistake. Guests exchanged glances, some sympathetic, some stunned, some quietly rooting for the woman who had endured far more than any polished exterior could express. But the story was much larger than the embarrassment of one man, because beneath the evening gowns, crisp suits, and champagne glasses lay a tangled history, a triangle built not on romance, but on ambition, pride, betrayal, and unexpected destiny. And as the murmurs spread around the marble floors, every listener felt a pull toward the same central question. What really happened between these three? Zaida, once a respected corporate attorney known for her composure, had been discarded as infertile, a label thrown at her so carelessly that even strangers repeated it as if it were fact. Her marriage didn't end quietly. It didn't fade with time. It was shattered by a betrayal wrapped in confidence and arrogance. A betrayal Caspian believed he'd never be held accountable for. He thought he had rewritten her future. He thought he had closed her chapter. But life had its own pen, because fate tied Zeta to his most formidable rival, not through design, not through a scheme, but through one unexpected truth. She was carrying the child of the man Caspian spent years trying to outshine. And whether anyone admitted it aloud or not, the tension in the ballroom came from one undeniable reality. Caspian wasn't just shocked. He was dethroned, not politically, not financially, but emotionally, personally, intimately, the kind of dethroning that couldn't be cleaned up with a statement or hidden behind a press release. Rhett's steady presence beside Zaida made the moment even sharper. He didn't crowd her. He didn't speak over her. He didn't attack Caspian. He simply stood with a certainty that sent a message through the entire room. Zaida's story was no longer controlled by the man who walked away. It now shared with someone who stepped in with intention. This was the core conflict. A woman once dismissed, a rival who never expected to be part of her journey, and a former husband forced to face the truth that the future he thought he ended had only just begun. This moment wasn't about a baby. It wasn't about vow scandal. It wasn't about revenge. It was about destiny stepping into a space where doubt once lived. And the question hanging in the air, the one they would feel pulling them forward, was simple. How did they reach this point? What path led Zaida to Rhett? And what truth about this pregnancy will turn Caspian's world upside down? The answers would reshape everything you thought you knew. The ballroom slowly shifted back into motion, but nothing about the atmosphere returned to what it was before Zeta and Rhett walked in. Because now, every guest understood one truth. They weren't witnessing a scandal. They were witnessing a beginning. Caspian, still standing rigidly before them, searched Zeta's expression for some trace of hesitation, a sign she might break or fold, or retreat the way she once did behind closed doors of their marriage. But Zaida didn't move. She didn't apologize. She didn't shrink to protect his pride. She stood with the grace of a woman who had rebuilt her identity piece by piece, not through grand gestures, but through quiet resilience he never cared to notice. Rhett's hand remained lightly at her back, not claiming her, not shielding her, simply grounding her, a gesture that made the question, in every observer's mind, sharpen into a burning curiosity. How did this happen? How did a woman, who was once spoken to like she was a burden, become the center of a story powerful enough to challenge two of DC's most influential men? And the viewers watching this unfold were now asking themselves, what journey brought Zeta here? How did she rise from heartbreak to a moment that shook a ballroom? But deeper than that, beneath the glamour, beyond the rivalry, another question pulsed with emotional weight. How did love grow between Zaida and a man like Rhett Harrington, a man who lived in a world of strategy, influence, and guarded choices? Because Rhett wasn't known for softness. He wasn't known for vulnerability. He wasn't known for attaching himself to anyone, not socially, not romantically. Yet here he was, standing beside Zaida, with a certainty that left the entire ballroom wondering, what made her the exception? What truth had they discovered together? And finally, the question that tightened every curious heartbeat in the room. What part of this pregnancy will upend everything Caspian believes about himself, about Zaida, and about the life he once controlled? Because this wasn't fate gently unfolding. This was fate confronting a lie that had once nearly destroyed her. Caspian stepped back slightly, the weight of the moment finally settling in. He realized something the guests around him had already sensed. This wasn't his story anymore. It wasn't his victory. It wasn't his decision to make. Zaida had stepped into a chapter entirely her own, and she was walking through it with someone prepared to honor her truth, not rewrite it. Rhett glanced at her with a confidence that pulled the entire room into silence once more. He didn't need to speak. His presence asked a final, unspoken question. Are you ready to see how everything truly began? Before we dive in, Fatal Embrace family, do me one favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment saying, I'm watching, and make sure you subscribe. Your support helps this channel reach more people who love powerful love stories with real lessons. Let's continue. Washington, D.C. carried a rhythm that pulsed with ambition, intellect, and relentless movement. The power corridors, polished conference rooms, riverfront views, and distinguished neighborhoods created a landscape where influence was currency, and presence had to be earned. Zada Morrow never had to force her presence. She carried it naturally, long before her name ever appeared on legal briefs or conference rosters. She was the product of Black excellence rooted in culture, intellect, and generational dignity. Raised in well-respected D.C. family, she grew up in a home where education was treated with honor, where identity was celebrated, and where discipline came not from fear but from expectation. Her father, Professor Langston Morrow, was a renowned international relations scholar at Georgetown University. His calm, steady voice filled conference halls. His academic work shaped policy discussions, and his reputation carried weight across continents. Her mother, Amina Morrow, was a former diplomat who once walked the corridors of the United Nations with ease and who returned home with stories that enriched the dinner table conversation. Zaida and her siblings grew up surrounded by books, art, and deep-rooted cultural pride. Their home was filled with jazz on Sundays, traditional dishes on family nights, and spirited debates that strengthened their voice and presence. Her extended family, aunties with bold opinions, uncles with political insight, cousins building careers across law, business, and medicine, created a foundation of community that was both grounding and inspiring. So, when Zaida stepped into the world, she didn't rise from brokenness. She rose from preparation. Her path into corporate law was not an accident. It was a calling shaped by years of watching her mother negotiate with grace and her father defend ideas with intellect. She excelled academically, graduated from a top law school, and secured a position at Harrington & Cole, one of DC's most respected firms. By 30, she had developed a reputation that few her age could claim. She wasn't just another attorney pushing paperwork. She was a brilliant strategist, fiercely analytical, and known for advocating with a voice that could quiet a room. Her ability to break down complex legal arguments with clarity made her a preferred counsel for political organizations, tech corporations, and influential nonprofits. Outside work, Zaida's life reflected the polished circles she moved through. Evening art exhibitions at the Smithsonian, Black professional mixers at upscale lounges, charity galas filled with thought leaders and innovators. She was often seen at brunches with her closest circle of Black women, judges, policy advisors, surgeons, and entrepreneurs, each of them a reflection of the excellence they lived daily. Zaida never had to pretend to belong. Her life was not a performance. It was the result of years of intention. Her wardrobe reflected her identity. Elegant dresses with cultural prints, tailored suits, soft curls framing her face, jewelry minimal yet meaningful. She moved with poise, not arrogance. Confidence, not flashiness. Her Blackness was not something she softened in these elite spaces. It was something she carried proudly. Even in this world of polished floors and whispered power dynamics, Zaida remained grounded. She respected her elders, mentored young interns, volunteered for youth leadership programs, and upheld the values she was raised with. Her name carried weight. Her voice carried truth. Her presence carried legacy. And yet, for all her accomplishments, for all her brilliance, for all her poise, there was one part of her story no one foresaw. One chapter that would shift the path of her life. Because even the strongest women, the most prepared, the most celebrated, the most put together, have vulnerabilities hidden behind polished exteriors. Zaida's life looked unbreakable, but life was preparing to test that belief. Just not in the way anyone expected. Not her colleagues, not her family, not even her, and especially not man she married. If Washington, D.C. had a poster child for polished ambition, Caspian Hale would be it. Tall, impeccably groomed, sharply intelligent, and strategically charming, He was the kind of man who entered a room and immediately drew attention, not for theatrics, but for precision. Everything about him was calculated. His tailored suits, his well-timed smiles, his firm yet courteous handshake. Born into a family with deep roots in national policy consulting, Caspian grew up attending private academies, summer programs abroad, and political fundraisers where he learned early how to network, negotiate, and hold influence. His father's consulting firm, Hale Strategic Group, had advised senators, multinational companies, and international coalitions. His mother, a respected economist, appeared on major network panels discussing markets and development patterns. Caspian inherited not just status, but expectation. He became known in DC political circles as a man poised for greatness. Handsome enough for magazine covers, intelligent enough to argue policy without notes, and confident enough to speak to an audience of hundreds as easily as speaking to one person at a dinner table. When he met Zaida, colleagues described them as a power pairing. Two brilliant minds, two polished professionals, two individuals cut from the cloth of respectability and discipline. Caspian admired Zaida's poise, her intellect, and her measured confidence. He admired how she walked into a room without needing to announce herself. In their early days, he seemed genuinely drawn to her strength, the kind that wasn't loud or attention-seeking, but steady and deeply cultivated. Their courtship was elegant, sophisticated, filled with private dinners, charity events, long conversations about career, policy, and legacy. Caspian appreciated her background, her upbringing, and how seamlessly she navigated spaces he considered prestigious. But admiration has layers, and for Caspian, admiration sometimes morphed into expectation. He liked excellence, but expectations often turned into pressure. He appreciated brilliance, but brilliance sometimes felt like competition. He advised collaboration, but collaboration sometimes masked control. When they married, they became DC royalty to the outside world, a Hale and a Morrow, strategist and attorney, Polish meeting polish. People whispered, they'll build an empire. What a formidable couple. They're destined for influence, and perhaps they were, until marriage revealed something the public never saw. Caspian didn't simply want a partner. He wanted someone who fit the mold he envisioned for his life, someone who adapted to his pace, absorbed his logic, and followed his structure. Zaida, raised on partnership and equality, didn't realize how controlled her world would become. Early cracks didn't appear in shouts or scandals. They appeared in subtle comments. You should consider a different practice area, one that benefits us politically. That dress isn't quite right for this fundraiser. I prefer when you do your hair like last week. Let me handle the talking tonight. To outsiders, Caspian was charming. Inside the marriage, he began to direct rather than connect. Still, Zaida tried to adjust, believing marriage required compromise. She believed in communication, in patience, in meeting halfway. And Caspian knew how to apologize with eloquence. Just enough to soothe, never enough to confront the root. So the world continued, believing theirs was a perfect marriage. But perfection, when built on cracks, never lasts. And Caspian Hale was a man who demanded the image of perfection, even at the cost of her peace. From the outside, Zaida and Caspian Hale were the golden couple of Washington, D.C. They appeared on panel discussions together. They co-hosted charity galas. They took coordinated photos at embassy events. They were interviewed for lifestyle magazines covering modern power couples of the capital. People loved them. People envied them. People studied them. But the curated world they presented was not the world they lived. Behind closed doors, marriage revealed an imbalance that grew with each passing month. Zaida noticed the first crack only 3 weeks after their honeymoon. She wore a dress she adored, a silk emerald green wrap with soft pleats. Caspian looked her once over and said, "It's beautiful, but perhaps something less bold for tonight. We want the focus on the firm." It wasn't said unkindly, but it carried weight. Expectation, preference, disguised as guidance. Zaida changed without protest, telling herself marriage required adjustment. Yet adjustments became routine. He corrected her subtly during conversations, offered unsolicited advice about her work-life balance, suggested improvements to her presentations, and frequently emphasized how their image reflected on one another. Little by little, Zaida began shrinking her vibrancy to fit the outlines of what Caspian approved. But she didn't lose herself. Not yet. She simply compromised. Believing partnership required sacrifice. Then came the expectations about children. They tried to conceive for months, guided by medical recommendations and hopeful optimism. But when nothing happened quickly, Caspian's demeanor shifted. What began as gentle concern slowly turned into pressure. Maybe you're too stressed from work. We need to prioritize this. This matters for our future, for everything we've built. Zaida tried, wholeheartedly, but stress never helps, nor does pressure masquerading as encouragement. Still, she persisted. Doctor visits, specialists, nutrition plans, tracking cycles became a second job she never asked for. And while she carried the emotional toll silently, Caspian carried something else. Assumption. The assumption that he could not be the problem. The assumption that fertility was her responsibility alone. The assumption that his expectations were truth. This assumption would soon become the crack that shattered everything. The morning the marriage cracked beyond repair felt painfully ordinary. Zaida had just finished making tea, chamomile with honey, when Caspian entered the kitchen holding a crisp white envelope. The specialist's envelope. His expression was rigid, his tone clipped. We need to talk. Zaida set her cup down. What did they say? He didn't look at her. He looked at the marble countertop, at the envelope, at everything except her eyes. The issue isn't me. A cold wave washed through her chest. She swallowed. So what does that mean, Caspian? It means, he said, voice flattening, you're the one with complications. Her throat tightened. Complications aren't conclusions. He cut her off sharply. I'm a man building a legacy. I don't have time for uncertainty. Zaida stared at him, eyes stinging, heart pounding, breath trapped somewhere between shock and pain. She opened the envelope. Read the analysis. Words like delayed conception, likelihood, and further evaluation required appeared, none of which equaled finality, none of which meant she could never conceive. But Caspian spoke as if the universe had issued a verdict. He continued, I can't keep pretending there's a future here. Not like this. Her voice trembled. Caspian, we're supposed to be a team. He shook his head. You don't understand what I need. My name must continue. My lineage must grow. This. He gestured vaguely at her midsection, at the air around them, at the marriage. Isn't working. Zaida felt something inside her fracture. Not her identity. Not her self-worth. But her faith in the man she married. That's cruel, she whispered. No, he replied coldly. It's realistic. His next words would redefine everything. There's something else, he said, clearing his throat. Zaida braced herself. What is it? I've been seeing someone. Her heart stopped. And she's pregnant. The room spun. The air thinned. The scent of chamomile turned metallic. Silence crashed over her like ice. You, her voice cracked. You replaced me before you even ended us. Caspian didn't flinch. I needed certainty. I found it. Zaida felt her knees weaken. She steadied herself on the counter, refusing to collapse. She would not give him that image. Not after everything, he continued, almost impatiently. I'll have my attorney contact you. We should finalize this quickly. And with that, he walked away. Not a hug, not remorse, not reflection, just departure, a man eager to rewrite his life at her expense. Zaida stood frozen in the penthouse that still smelled of the breakfast she cooked, the home she maintained, the life she believed in. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to break, not loudly, not dramatically, but silently, controlled. Alone, she pressed a hand to her abdomen, not because she expected life to grow there, but because she needed to hold herself together. Caspian Hale didn't just leave her. He tried to reduce her future to a medical line. He tried to disqualify her womanhood. He tried to define her destiny with a single sentence. But life had plans he never anticipated, and destiny had written a chapter he would never be ready to read. When the divorce papers were finalized, Zaida didn't collapse into isolation or flee Washington, D.C. to escape the whispers. Instead, she moved with intention, the same intention she'd carried her entire life. Her new home was a luxurious apartment overlooking the river in Navy Yard, one of D.C.'s most polished, modern neighborhoods. The building was known for its floor-to-ceiling windows, concierge service, rooftop lounges, and residents who had titles attached to their names: attorneys, policy directors, tech founders, senior consultants, and art curators. Zaida selected it because it felt like a fresh page, clean, open, refined, but grounded enough for her to breathe again without the suffocating energy of her marriage. On her first morning there, she stood barefoot on the balcony. The city stretched below, the sound of passing cars mixing with soft winds from the river. Sunlight washed over her skin, and for the first time in months, she felt something she thought she'd lost. Control, not of the past, but of the next step. Her family helped her settle in, her mother arranging her books by theme, her sister filling the kitchen with fresh produce and handwritten notes, her cousins jokingly arguing about who carried heavier boxes. By the time the last item was placed, a framed photo from a Morrow family reunion, Zaida looked around and saw the truth. This wasn't a downgraded life. This wasn't a retreat. This was a reset. Her new apartment reflected her independence, her taste, her culture. Warm-toned art, created by black artists, lined the walls. Shelves held books on diplomacy, strategy, and historical achievements. Her office space faced the river, carrying the quiet energy she needed to return fully to work. And she did return. Zaida resumed her routine at Harrington and Cole without missing momentum. She walked into the law firm with the same poise she always had, nodding politely to colleagues, speaking firmly in meetings, delivering proposals with sharp clarity. People noticed she was leaner emotionally, not broken, but refined, as if she'd shed an old version of herself and stepped into a stronger mold. That strength echoed through her social life as well. She resumed attending art galas, museum receptions, jazz events, and charity fundraisers. She showed up in tailored dresses, soft curls, and quiet confidence. She never over-explained her situation, never apologized for her presence. Washington, D.C. was a city that observed everything, but Zaida knew how to move through observation with elegance. She didn't hide or shrink into shadows. She walked with deliberate calm, and the city adjusted to her new chapter, not the other way around. Every evening, she returned to her apartment. She lit a warm candle, played soft music, and made tea while reviewing legal documents. Simple rituals grounding her back into her identity. Her balcony became her place of release, a space where she watched rowers glide across the river at dusk, joggers pass below, and city lights flicker like scattered jewels. Navy Yard became more than home. It became her declaration. She was not a defeated woman. She a rebuilt one. And life was not ending. It was shifting. Behind every strong black woman in D.C. was a circle of equally powerful women who carried one another when life tried to pull them apart. Zaida's circle was no exception. Her closest friends, Renee, a federal policy advisor, Charmaine, a neurosurgeon, and Layla, a senior strategist at a global nonprofit, were the kind of women who could navigate boardrooms, hospital corridors, and international meetings without losing their rootedness. They were the women Zaida called her sisters, by choice. When the divorce became public, they didn't wait for her to ask for support. They showed up. Renee arrived at her new apartment with food and floral arrangements. Charmaine brought laughter, refusing to let heavy energy silence the space. Layla offered insight, grounding Zaida with reminders of her brilliance, her worth, her resilience. Their meetups became a weekly ritual. Brunch at Busboys and Poets, where cultural pride blended with intellectual conversation. Dinner at upscale lounges where they dissected politics and relationships with the same analytical power they brought to work. Walks by the waterfront where Zaida could vent without burden, cry without judgment, or simply sit in silence with women who understood strength wasn't the absence of pain, but the decision to rise through it. They reminded her constantly, you didn't lose anything worth keeping. He didn't reject you. He revealed himself. Your future is bigger than his imagination. Their presence gave Zaida room to rebuild emotionally, not through bitterness, but through truth. They never rushed her healing, never pressured her to date again, never dismissed the depth of her heartbreak. Instead, they helped her remember who she had been long before Caspian, a woman of purpose, intellect, culture, and beauty. In that circle, Zaida could breathe again, laugh freely again, plan again. They also shielded her professionally. When colleagues asked insensitive questions, Renee intercepted with diplomatic precision. When someone tried gossiping near Charmaine, she shut it down with a single glare. When Zaida hesitated to attend her first major gala post-divorce, Layla said simply, you walk in there as Zaida Morrow, not someone's ex. And Zaida believed her. These women weren't just friends. They were mirrors, reflecting back her value when she forgot it, reminding her that community was not optional in healing. And through them, Zaida found space to stand taller, not because she had something to prove, but because she finally remembered she never needed validation to begin with. Her circle held her with strength. And through that strength, Zaida began to feel whole again. Washington, D.C. had many qualities: intellect, opportunity, structure. But silence wasn't one of them. If something happened in the city's elite circles, it moved fast. And Zaida's divorce was no exception. It began subtly. A glance held a second too long. A whisper exchanged behind champagne glasses. A conversation paused the moment she entered a room. People didn't need confirmation. They only needed the first spark of scandal to ignite curiosity. Her sudden move to Navy Yard, Caspian appearing at events without her, comments he allowed others to overhear. DC society filled in the blanks with its own assumptions. She must be devastated. He left her for someone younger, I heard. My cousin said she couldn't have children. That's why it ended. I wonder how she's even managing. This must be humiliating. The thing about DC gossip was that it carried layers, a polished tone masking sharp edges, a compassionate tone disguising fascination, a faux concern hiding a hunger for updates. But no matter the angle, everyone expected Zaida to respond, to cry, to hide, to withdraw, to defend herself. Instead, she said nothing. She didn't clarify details, didn't offer explanations, didn't sanitize Caspian's actions, didn't respond to subtle digs from people who thought they were discreet. Her silence was intentional, not weak. Her composure, deliberate, not cold. She understood something most people never learn. Not every truth needs public validation. Not every wound needs an audience. Not every betrayal deserves a voice. Her refusal to feed gossip gave her something invaluable: power. People didn't know what to do with a woman who didn't crumble publicly. A woman who refused to give pain a spotlight. A woman who walked into events calmly, nodded politely, smiled when appropriate, and left without fuss. The city watched her, expecting a breaking point. Never came. Her silence reshaped the conversation. Instead of pity, it became respect. Instead of gossip, it became curiosity. Instead of she's broken, it became she's handling this with grace. Some women admired her strength openly. Men who once dismissed her became cautious around her, aware she was not someone to underestimate. Younger professionals whispered, "That's exactly how you rise above something." Zaida never set out to inspire anyone, but dignity has a way of creating its own ripple effect. Still, the whispers continued, just quieter now. She changed. She looks calmer. She's working even better than before. She carries herself differently. And perhaps the most ironic whisper of all, she looks free. Zaida didn't correct them, because while she didn't celebrate her pain, she did acknowledge one truth privately. She was, in many ways, free. Free from expectation. Free from criticism disguised as counsel. Free from a marriage built on control. Free from someone who never protected her heart. And this newfound freedom, quiet, steady, transformative, would soon draw the attention of someone who understood the weight of silence far more than anyone realized. Someone whose eyes had been following her long before she ever noticed his. Rhett Harrington was not the type of man who paid attention to social noise. He was too disciplined, too private, too focused on running a corporation that demanded precision. But Zaida, the Yida, was not noise. She was presence. The first time he saw her after the divorce, she was standing beside a marble column at a diplomatic fundraiser in Foggy Bottom. She wore a fitted navy dress, her curls pinned back, her posture effortlessly poised. She wasn't trying to be seen. She wasn't engaging loudly. She wasn't performing confidence. Yet she drew his eye without effort. She laughed at something a colleague said, not loudly, not dramatically, but softly, with sincerity. He watched the way her eyes warmed, the way she tilted her head when listening, the way she shifted politely when someone crossed her personal space. She carried an aura he couldn't quite name, something that felt like quiet thunder. Subtle, restrained, but powerful once noticed. At the time, he didn't approach. He only observed, from a distance that allowed interest without intrusion. But the next time he saw her, it couldn't be dismissed as coincidence. It was at a policy innovation summit. Zaida had just finished speaking on a panel about intellectual property and ethical contracting, a topic most guests found dull but critical. She delivered her points with clarity, strength, and articulation that set her apart. Rhett stood at the back of the room, listening, not because he planned to, but because her voice captured him. Measured, confident, soft, but commanding. She spoke as if she knew her worth, even if her personal life had recently attempted to diminish it. When she stepped off the stage, she smiled politely at two attendees, thanking her. Her eyes passed briefly over the audience and landed near where Rhett stood. For 1 second, they held, a moment so brief it could be dismissed as accident, yet long enough for Rhett to feel something shift in his chest. Interest, recognition, curiosity. He didn't approach her here either, but he noted the feeling, and that alone surprised him. In the following weeks, he saw her again at a private museum preview, then at a charity dinner for youth empowerment, then at a law symposium where she sat quietly in the front row, listening with intent. Each time, he noticed something new. Her calm, her independence, her strength beneath the surface, her refusal to shrink despite the whispers around her. She was not hiding from the world. She was reclaiming her space in it. And Rhett, known for his reserved nature, found himself wanting to understand her story, not through gossip, not through rumor, but through the way she carried herself. By the fourth event, where their paths crossed, he realized something he had never expected. He looked for her, not because she beautiful, though she was, not because she was accomplished, though she was, but because her presence gave him a sense of steadiness he hadn't felt around anyone in years. There was something about Zaida Morrow that drew him in without effort, a gravity that existed without manipulation, a resilience that spoke quietly but profoundly. He didn't speak to her yet, but noticing her, seeing her, recognizing her worth long before she knew he was watching. That was the beginning, and neither of them had any idea how significant those silent moments would become. The moment happened on a crisp Thursday evening in Georgetown, at a private fundraising event hosted at the historic Maystone House. It was one of those gatherings where the guest list was curated with surgical precision. Lawmakers, philanthropists, high-profile tech leaders, and the type of DC elite who measured reputation as carefully as their investments. Zaida didn't plan to attend at first. She had a long day at the firm. Her schedule was tight, and her emotions had been quietly heavy after a particularly difficult deposition. But Charmaine insisted. "You need air, sis. Real air. The kind that reminds you who you are," she said over FaceTime, while getting ready herself. So Zaida, dressed in an elegant, deep emerald evening gown that hugged her shape without announcing itself. Her curls were styled softly down her shoulders, her makeup natural and effortless. She arrived with quiet confidence, the sort that turned heads without her trying. Inside the Maystone house, the atmosphere was polished but vibrant. Soft jazz drifted through the room. Servers glided by with trays of wine, and the lighting warmed the golden accents of the space. Conversations rose and fell in a steady hum. Zaida mingled with grace, greeting familiar faces, colleagues, policy experts, art patrons she'd met at previous galas. She stood near a grand window, overlooking the courtyard, when she felt it. A presence, not a stare, not an accidental glance, something more deliberate. Her eyes lifted and met Rhett Harrington's. He stood across the room, surrounded by 2 congressmen and a well-known philanthropist, yet his focus wasn't on them. It won her. The contact didn't jolt her, didn't overwhelm her. It simply held steady. His expression was calm, composed, but there was an unmistakable curiosity in his eyes, not the kind born from gossip or spectacle, but one born from recognition, as though he had been waiting for the exact moment. She finally noticed him. Zaida's breath caught, not dramatically, but in a way she felt inside her chest, a quiet awareness. She didn't look away immediately. Neither did he. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of presence, of energy, of 2 paths that had brushed near each other without crossing. Till now? The eye contact lasted only a heartbeat longer than casual. But it changed everything. Rhett subtly excused himself from the group. Zaida didn't move, partly from curiosity, partly from wondering if she misunderstood his intention. But she hadn't. He walked toward her with a confidence that wasn't arrogant, more like someone used to being decisive. People turned slightly as he passed, recognizing him immediately. Harrington's sightings always shifted the air. When he finally reached her, he stopped at a respectful distance, close enough to speak, far enough not to intrude. "Ms. Morrow," he said, his voice calm, deep, refined. Zaida's brows lifted gently. "Mr. Harrington." A pause, a moment where neither looked away. "I've been meaning to introduce myself," he said. Her heart gave a soft, unexpected flutter. "Have you?" "Yes," he replied simply, as though it was the most obvious truth in the room. She held his gaze, trying to read him. Rhett Harrington was a man DC respected and feared. His company, his wealth, his strategic mind made him a force. Yet he didn't carry the cold sharpness she had grown accustomed to with Caspian. Rhett's presence felt grounded, observant, intentional. "I'm glad we finally crossed paths," he continued. "You have a way of standing out without trying. Zaida blinked once, his words unexpected, but not invasive. That's not usually what people say about me, she replied softly. That's because most people don't know how to really look, he said. Silence followed. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was connected, as if their energies aligned, without either of them pushing toward it. Zaida shifted her glass slightly in her hand. You've been at several events lately. His lips twitched. Not a full smile, but a quiet acknowledgement. Have you? So we've both noticed, she said. Yes, he responded, his voice low. We have. A spark flickered between them. Subtle, but undeniable. Neither stepped closer. Yet the air held the kind of tension that didn't require proximity. It was the type of moment where two people realized, without confessing out loud, something is happening here. But neither of them rushed it. Neither reached out too soon. Neither forced meaning into the moment. The spark existed on its own. Before the conversation could deepen, one of Zaida's colleagues approached, waving politely. Zaida, they're calling all counsel to the East Wing for introductions. She turned back to Rhett. Duty calls. So it seems, he said, voice smooth. She gave him a small, genuine smile. The first one she didn't overthink in months. Good night, Mr. Harrington. Good night, Ms. Morrow. Pause. And Zaida, she glanced back, curious. This won't be the last time we talk. Her pulse lifted. Not fearfully, but with interest. Is that confidence? Or a prediction? Neither, he replied gently. Just truth. Zaida didn't respond. She didn't need to. The warmth rising in her chest said enough. As she walked toward the East Wing, she could feel his eyes following her. Not possessively, not arrogantly, but with genuine intrigue. And in that moment, she knew this, the beginning of something. Something she hadn't planned. Something she didn't yet understand. Something that felt like possibility. If there was one thing Rhett Harrington respected more than intelligence, it was resilience. And Zaida Morrow embodied it without theatrics, without speeches, without trying to prove anything to anyone. He noticed it gradually. At each event, gala, summit, or policy forum where their paths crossed, she carried herself with the same quiet composure, a lifted chin, steady stride, soft voice, and a gaze that suggested she saw more than she ever said. Most people wore their setbacks, like badges or wounds, visible, loud, often messy. Zaida wore hers, like silk, smoothed, centered, and folded into strength. He watched carefully, not in a way that invaded her space, not in a way that belonged to obsession, but in a way that belonged to recognition. After years of navigating Washington's elite, he understood how people moved after betrayal. Some became bitter, some became reckless, some became shadows of who they once were. Zaida became none of these. If anything, her pain had sculpted her into something sharper, not hardened, refined. He saw it in the way her smile softened when speaking to younger professionals, seeking advice. He saw it in her eyes when she listened intently to speakers, absorbing their ideas with genuine curiosity. He saw it in the controlled grace of her posture, even when she knew whispers trailed behind her. He once overheard two guests at a private business brunch murmuring about her divorce. She handled it too well, one woman whispered. She should have said something, another added. Rhett had been standing close enough to catch the comment. He didn't interrupt. That wasn't his style. But his jaw tightened, just slightly. Any woman who carried that kind of emotional storm without public collapse deserved respect, not scrutiny. He also learned, indirectly, that she never corrected the false narratives Caspian allowed to circulate about her fertility. She absorbed the hit, kept her dignity, and continued living. That impressed him more than any corporate achievement she'd ever listed in her legal career. There was something magnetic about a person who refused to let their worth be dictated by someone else's absence. Rhett saw that in her over and over again. At a Smithsonian gala, she arrived in a black velvet gown, appearing grounded, radiant, and unbothered by the fact that nearly every seat of value glanced her way. She greeted people politely, enjoyed quiet moments with friends, and carried herself as if the room belonged to her, not arrogantly, but with natural command. Later that night, when she stepped outside for fresh air, he noticed how she closed her eyes for a brief moment, a gesture that suggested exhaustion, reflection, and an internal conversation she kept tightly guarded. But when she opened them again, the softness returned, as though she refused to let private heaviness dictate her public presence. That level of emotional discipline was rare. He admired her for it, and he wasn't the type to admire easily. Zayda Morrow had become, unintentionally, one of the few people in the city he wanted to understand, not through headlines or whispers, but through truth, and that quiet, stirring inside him. The interest he tried to set aside would only grow stronger the more their paths intertwined. It happened at the Harrington Foundation's annual Winter Benefit, a formal event held at the Library of Congress, known for attracting policymakers, CEOs, and high-level donors. Zayda attended not because she felt obligated, but because one of her clients was sponsoring a portion of the event. She arrived in a soft champagne-colored gown that shimmered subtly under the lights. Her hair was styled in loose waves, framing her face in a way that looked effortlessly elegant. Rhett noticed her the instant she stepped into the main hall. He was mid-conversation with a senator, but his attention shifted, not dramatically, but with a slow, undeniable turn of his head, the kind that happened when something commanded his eye without warning. She wasn't the loudest presence in the room. She wasn't the most dramatic, but she was the one that held his focus. As the evening progressed, their paths drifted closer. A brief glance near the silent auction table, a small smile exchanged as she walked past the orchestra platform, a shared nod near the donors' lounge. Finally, opportunity appeared. Zayda stood alone near a display of historical manuscripts, reading the descriptions with quiet interest. The soft lighting cast a warm glow around her, and her posture carried the same strength Rhett always noticed. Shoulders relaxed, chin lifted, presence controlled yet inviting. Rhett approached without rushing. "Ms. Morrow," he greeted. She turned, slowly, intentionally, and a faint recognition shaped her expression. "Mr. Harrington." There was again the spark, that subtle pull neither of them voiced. He gestured lightly to the exhibit. "You seem more interested in the manuscripts than the politics tonight." Zayda smiled gently. "The manuscripts don't lie, or make promises they never keep." A quiet laugh escaped him. Low, surprised, genuine. She had layers, and they were showing. "Fair point," he said. "I suppose that's why I come here too. It's grounding." Her brows lifted slightly, as if she hadn't expected an answer that sincere. "Do you often step away from the main crowd?" she asked. "Often enough," he replied. "It helps me think and observe." "Observe?" She echoed, amused. "That sounds strategic." "It is," he said honestly, "in business, in politics, but also in understanding people." Her eyes studied him, curious, but cautious. "And what exactly have you understood tonight?" Rhett held her gaze, steady but respectful. "That you move with more strength than most people in this room combined." Zayda exhaled softly, not flattered, not flustered, but taken aback by the accuracy of the statement. "Strength isn't always choice," she replied quietly. "No," he agreed, "but how you carry it. That is." Silence wrapped around them again. Warm, unforced, meaningful. He decided to ask the question carefully. "May I say something without overstepping?" Zayda tilted her head. "You may try." His tone softened. "You look at peace, Ms. Morrow. Not untouched, but at peace with who you're becoming. Her lips parted, her breath stilling for a second. Very few people saw her clearly. Even fewer spoke to her without agenda. Almost no one acknowledged both her pain and her progress in a single sentence. But he just had. She didn't respond immediately. She needed a moment to process the weight of being seen. Truly seen. After months of navigating private devastation and public speculation. Finally, she spoke. "You observe well, Mr. Harrington." "I try," he said, his voice low, his eyes locked with hers. The moment stretched. Not romantic yet, not flirtatious, but alive with potential. They stood near centuries-old manuscripts that chronicled American power influence and transformation, fitting companions for a moment that would quietly alter the course of both their lives. Before their conversation could deepen, a board member approached Rhett, pulling him away. He hesitated, subtly, before stepping back. "Enjoy your evening, Zeta." Her first name, spoken with intention, spoken with awareness, spoken softly enough to settle beneath her ribs. She watched him walk away, a strange warmth blooming inside her. She didn't understand it yet, but she felt it, and feelings, no matter how quiet, had a way of shaping futures neither person saw coming. Before Zaida ever became a point of tension between them, Caspian Hale and Rhett Harrington were already quiet adversaries. Two men who understood power differently, fought for it differently, and wielded it differently. Their rivalry started long before Zeta entered Rhett's line of sight. It began with a series of high-stakes federal contract bids, massive infrastructure, tech modernization, and policy-aligned projects that required companies to demonstrate both capability and political finesse. Harrington Global and Hale Industries were often finalists for the same opportunities, their proposals landing side by side on government evaluation desks year after year. Their battle wasn't loud, wasn't filled with outbursts. It wasn't messy. It was strategic, a silent contest of influence. Who could gain more trust? Who could secure stronger partnerships? Who could build deeper alliances within Washington's inner circles? Both men were talented. Caspian was charismatic, polished, and ambitious in a way that appealed to donors who loved charm and big personalities. He knew how to network aggressively, how to impress quickly, and how to turn social relationships into business leverage. Rhett, on the other hand, didn't rely on charisma. He relied on data, discipline, execution. He was measured, cautious, and far more respected among decision-makers who favored stability over theatrics. His reputation was built on impeccable delivery, clean negotiations, and the ability to see problems 3 steps before anyone else. That difference made them natural rivals. Caspian played the game loudly. Rhett played it tout, and Washington had space for both men until their worldviews collided. In the years leading up to Zaida's divorce, Harrington Global had begun winning contracts that Hale Industries once considered guaranteed, not because of luck, but because Rhett's methods were sharper, less wasteful, and more trustworthy to federal boards, tired of predictable playmakers like Caspian. Caspian hated it. He pretended not to, smiling at galas, offering forced handshakes at summits. But the tension lived beneath every interaction. People in the industry sensed it. 2 rising titans, 2 different philosophies, 2 men shaping the city's future in opposite ways. By the time Harrington Global secured a breakthrough technology contract that Hale Industries had fiercely pursued, the silent rivalry hardened into something unmistakable. Colleagues whispered, "Hale will never forgive that loss." Policy advisors joked. If looks could kill, Rhett's last board presentation would have ended differently. Even lobbyists knew. The Harrington versus Hale dynamic was unspoken, but deeply entrenched. Still, neither man allowed the rivalry to spill into public conflict. They didn't need to speak about their dislike for each other. It lived in the energy between them, in the glances across crowded rooms, in the rare, clipped greetings at formal events. When Caspian and Zaida divorced, most of the city expected he would move on confidently, continuing his social ascension without hesitation. But something unexpected happened. Zaida's grace in the aftermath worked against him. Her silence enhanced her dignity. Her composure contrasted sharply with rumors surrounding his decisions. And people noticed. Some donors who once favored Caspian shifted toward Rhett, subtly but noticeably. Lobbyists began choosing Rhett as a preferred partner in proposal drafts. Government evaluators publicly complimented Zaida's professionalism during high-profile negotiations, which cast a softer, more human light around Harrington Global through association. None of this was planned. None of this was intentional. But Caspian felt it. Every time Zaida appeared composed and respected in public, it made his choices appear reckless by comparison. Every time she ignored gossip, she made him look insecure. Every time she stepped into a room with dignity, she reminded him, and everyone else, of the kind of woman he had discarded. And when Rhett began to notice her, when he offered small nods across rooms, when he positioned himself in conversations close enough to observe her expressions, Caspian caught it. He wasn't a fool. Painful mistakes didn't make him blind. He saw the subtle pull forming. He saw where Rhett's gaze lingered. He saw Zaida standing taller, glowing in ways she never did with him. And something inside him tightened, fiercely, unexpectedly. Not out of love, not out of remorse, but out of pride. How dare his greatest rival see value in the woman he cast aside? How dare the city begin pairing the unspoken words Zaida Morrow and Rhett Harrington in the same conversations? How dare his ex-wife, the woman he dismissed, become the woman another powerful man admired? This rivalry, already built on business and influence, was now becoming personal. And that shift would change everything. Rhett Harrington had never been someone who chased people. He chased goals. He chased innovation. He chased precision. But people? Rarely. So when he found himself reorganizing his calendar to attend events he previously declined, he recognized the truth long before he admitted it. He wanted to see her, not accidentally, not coincidentally, intentionally, but respectfully. He didn't insert himself into her private life. He didn't send messages or gestures that could be misconstrued. He didn't act entitled to her attention. Instead, he simply placed himself in spaces where interaction was natural, appropriate, and organic, the same way two professionals of their standing would inevitably cross paths. It began with a strategy luncheon on cybersecurity law. Rhett rarely attended these unless he was speaking. But when he saw her name on the guest list, he accepted the invitation immediately. During the luncheon, he didn't sit beside her. He sat diagonally across from her, close enough to observe her insight, far enough to avoid making her uncomfortable. When she spoke, he listened. When she smiled at something a colleague said, he noticed. When she tucked a stray curl behind her ear, he felt a small, quiet pull in his chest. Another opportunity came 2 weeks later, a private art auction supporting youth education. Zaida attended with her friends. Rhett attended alone. At one point, she was examining a contemporary piece by a rising black painter. Rhett approached the display from the opposite side, and their eyes caught through the glass. She held his gaze for a moment, before offering a subtle, polite nod. He returned it, with a slightly warmer expression than etiquette required. Later that evening, when she moved toward the hors d'oeuvres table, Rhett adjusted his pace, ensuring he was close enough to greet her, but not blocking her path. "Ms. Morrow," he said in a low tone. "Mr. Harrington," she replied, her voice smooth, aware. "You have good taste," he added, gesturing to her bid on a piece. "So do you," she whispered, not flirtatious, but acknowledging something unspoken between them. These interactions continued. Not excessive, not forceful, just intentional. He appeared at policy forums she attended, at charity briefings she contributed to, at round table discussions where her legal insight was valued. Whenever he arrived, he didn't hover. He didn't interrupt. He didn't claim space that wasn't his. He simply respected her presence and allowed her to notice his. And she did notice. The way he looked at her without expectation. The way he positioned himself at a respectful distance. The way he spoke to her without ever mentioning her past, her ex-husband, or the gossip surrounding her name. He offered space without stepping away. Attention without pressure. Presence without ownership. It was the first time in years a man with power offered her something she rarely received: choice. He wasn't waiting for her to collapse into his arms. He wasn't trying to fix her life or rescue her. He was simply showing up, consistently, quietly, in a way that said, if you ever want me in your world, I will meet you where you are. And that gentle pursuit, so unlike the dominance and control Caspian once exerted, touched something deep within her. Something she didn't know was ready to wake. For months after the divorce, Zaida walked through Washington, D.C. with a steady posture and a guarded heart. She spoke confidently. She worked flawlessly. She showed up at events with dignity. But there was one truth she never admitted aloud. Not to her friends, not to her family, not even to herself. No one had truly seen her. Not the way she needed to be seen. Not beyond her resume. Not beyond her poise. Not beyond the scars she hid with practiced grace. Caspian never really saw her. He saw what she offered: stability, elegance, intelligence. But he didn't see her strength when she held their marriage together. He didn't see her heartbreak when doctors' reports weighed on her. He didn't see her fear, or her hope, or her quiet prayers for a future that included children. He saw her as an asset, not as a woman. But Rhett observed her in ways that required intuition and patience. It began subtly. She noticed how he looked at her during roundtable discussions. Not distractedly, not possessively, but attentively, as if her words mattered, as if her thoughts carried weight, as if her presence added value to any room. She noticed how he gave her space during events, not stepping too close, not crowding her, but always choosing a distance that felt intentional and safe. She noticed the tone of his voice when he spoke to her: calm, level, never condescending, never assuming she needed protection, yet somehow expressing that he would protect her without expecting anything in return. The more she saw him, the more she recognized something she hadn't felt in a long time: ease. With Rhett, she never felt performance pressure. She didn't have to defend herself. She didn't have to pretend everything was fine. She didn't have to shrink or harden. He engaged with her as if she existed entirely outside the shadow of her past. One moment, in particular, marked the shift inside her. It was at a congressional reception, a room full of polished egos and strategic alliances. Zaida attended with colleagues from her firm, her smile calm but tired after a long week. As she stood by the refreshments table, she overheard two attendees whispering about her divorce. The comments weren't harsh, but they were careless, the kind that cut quietly. Zaida inhaled, steadying herself. She'd heard worse. She'd survived heavier. But before she could turn away, a presence moved beside her. Rhett? He didn't interrupt the gossipers. He didn't confront them. He didn't make a scene. Instead, he positioned himself subtly beside her, creating a buffer, turning his body slightly toward hers, a silent gesture of support and acknowledgement. Long evening? He asked softly. Zaida's shoulders eased. Long week. You carried it well, he replied. Even when people don't deserve to witness your strength. She blinked, slowly, feeling something warm bloom beneath her ribs. Wasn't romantic attraction? Not yet. It was recognition, validation, being understood without having to explain. A rare, precious feeling she had forgotten she needed. From that moment on, she noticed him in ways that felt unfamiliar, gentle, steady, safe. She noticed how he listened when she spoke during panels, nodding subtly when she made strong points. She noticed how he glanced her way before giving remarks of his own, almost as if acknowledging her presence helped ground him. She noticed how he never looked away quickly when their eyes met, instead offering a respectful pause, as if silently asking permission to hold her gaze. But the turning point, the moment she truly felt seen, happened on a rainy evening at a philanthropic networking dinner. She arrived late, weather-worn and exhausted, her curls damp from the mist outside. She nearly turned around to go home, but a text from Renee encouraged her to stay strong and show up. When she walked inside, she felt a flicker of insecurity, small, momentary, but real, until she spotted Rhett across the reception hall. His eyes lifted the moment she entered. No delay, no confusion, no judgment. Lee warmth. A subtle shift softened his features. Surprise mingled with something else, something unmistakably sincere. He walked toward her, not hurriedly, not dramatically, but with purpose. "You came," he said, his tone warm. Zayda exhaled quietly. "I wasn't sure I'm glad you did." His voice was low, but his meaning was clear. He noticed her effort, her presence, her strength even when she felt off balance. No one, not even during her marriage, had spoken to her like that. With authenticity, with consideration, with a gentle awareness of her humanity. Zayda felt something inside her shift. Not dramatically, not dangerously, but undeniably. A soft spark, awakening, in a heart that had been dimmed by neglect and disappointment. For the first time since her marriage ended, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel like a burden. She didn't feel like a story whispered behind closed doors. She felt seen, truly seen. Not as Caspian's former wife, not as a woman with a wound the world tried to define, not as a subject of gossip, but as Zayda Morrow, a woman of worth, a woman of depth, a woman whose presence could draw the attention of someone steady, powerful, and unexpectedly gentle. As the evening continued, Rhett didn't hover. He didn't dominate her space, but he was near, unmistakably present, offering quiet moments of shared conversation, subtle glances, and a growing familiarity that settled into her chest like warm light. For the first time in a very long time, Zayda felt like herself again, the version not defined by betrayal, but by possibility. And that realization, delicate, profound, almost frightening in its honesty, was the beginning of everything that would follow. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered in an elegant black envelope with embossed silver lettering. It was the kind of invitation reserved for people whose careers had earned them a seat at the highest tables, not public events, not open receptions, but the private spaces where DC's most influential minds exchanged ideas away from flashing cameras. The Meridian Circle, annual private exchange, held at one of the city's most exclusive penthouse venues, overlooking the skyline. Zayda had heard of the Meridian Circle. Everyone had. It wasn't the kind of event you requested access to. You were chosen, selected, quietly evaluated, and deemed worthy of contributing to the conversation. Her first reaction wasn't pride. It was surprise. Why would they invite me? She asked aloud as she reread the card in her office. Her assistant, Mona, smiled knowingly. Zayda, you've won 3 major intellectual property cases this year. You're representing clients other firms have been chasing for ages. And let's be honest, your professionalism after your divorce only raised your reputation. Zayda gave modest exhale. Still feels unexpected. Maybe, Mona replied, but you earned it. Zayda ran her thumb across the embossed lettering. The timing was interesting. She wasn't naive. She knew the invitation didn't appear in a vacuum. Her visibility had grown. Her voice had mattered in recent policy discussions, and more people were beginning to see her beyond the gossip attached to her name. But there was something else. A subtle thought, a suspicion her mind whispered, but refused to fully entertain. Was Rhett Harrington connected to this? He was known to advise the Meridian Circle on guest selections, based on emerging leaders, innovators, and strategic thinkers. His recommendations carried weight, yet he had never said anything to her about it. He never hinted, never suggested she should attend. If he influenced the invitation at all, he did it quietly, almost respectfully, without trying to take credit or make her feel indebted. Still, Zaida couldn't confirm it, and she wasn't going to assume. She set the invitation on her desk and returned her attention to her ongoing cases. But as the day progressed, small traces of anticipation tugged at her thoughts. The Meridian Circle was not an event where people mingled to be seen. It was where alliances formed, where rivalries sharpened, where careers shifted in meaningful ways without a single headline published. It was a room that shaped the city. That evening, when Zaida told her friends at dinner, their reactions came exactly as she expected. Renee gasped. "Oh, you're in the room now." The room. Charmaine clapped dramatically. "This major. You better walk in there, glowing." Layla grinned. "This is what happens when you stay quiet and let your work speak." Zaida chuckled softly, trying not to overthink it. "Let's not make it more than it is." But her friends exchanged looks, knowing ones. "Zaida," Renee said gently, "you have no idea how many people respect you because of how you carried yourself this past year. And how you're rising now," Layla added. "This invitation? It's not luck. It's alignment." Zaida smiled. A real one, warm and steady. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was stepping into a new season. Maybe the timing wasn't accidental. But she still wondered, quietly, privately, whether Rhett would be there. She didn't ask. She didn't want her friends reading into anything. But the truth sat like a gentle hum beneath her thoughts. If he was there, she would feel it. The night of the event arrived quickly. Zaida chose a sleek, elegant gown in deep sapphire, understated yet powerful. Her curls were pinned loosely at the back, a few tendrils framing her cheekbones. She didn't dress to impress. She dressed to inhabit her confidence. As she rode the elevator to the penthouse venue, her reflection in the polished metal doors revealed something subtle but unmistakable. She looked ready. Stepping out, she entered a softly lit space filled with warm conversation, classical strings, and an atmosphere that signaled both exclusivity and intellect. Lawmakers stood beside tech founders. Renowned journalists leaned in to hear insights from economists. Decorated consultants conversed with diplomats. Zaida took a breath. She belonged here, whether she felt nervous or not. She moved with graceful self-assurance through the room until her steps slowed just slightly. Because across the space, standing with a drink in hand, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him with quiet precision, Rhett Harrington looked up and saw her. His expression didn't shift dramatically. It softened, warmed, acknowledged her presence in a way that felt more intimate than the setting allowed. Zaida's heartbeat fluttered before she steadied herself. She was here for her career, her network, her voice, but she couldn't deny the truth humming inside her. His presence added something to the room. Something steady, something safe, something she hadn't felt in years. She continued walking, keeping her composure, yet knowing, without a single spoken word, that tonight would shift something between them. She felt it, and wasn't wrong. The event unfolded in soft waves of conversation and intellectual exchange. Guests drifted from group to group, exchanging insights on policy reform, tech innovation, and the city's shifting economic landscape. Zaida contributed gracefully, not loudly, not excessively, but with quiet authority that made people lean in when she spoke. And Rhett noticed every second. He didn't hover around her, but he remained aware of her location, the same way one remains aware of a calming presence in a crowded space. Near the midpoint of the evening, the host announced that the rooftop terrace was now open for guests who wanted fresh air or quieter conversations. Zaida took the opportunity. Her mind needed space to breathe. Her heart needed distance from the subtle tension she felt every time Rhett drifted near her orbit. She stepped on to the rooftop, greeted by a stunning view of the DC skyline. The night air was cool, crisp, and refreshing, a perfect contrast to the warmth of the gathering inside. She walked toward the glass railing, placing her hands lightly on the ledge. Below her, the city glimmered, steady, alive, full of stories unfolding in every direction. She was lost in thought when she sensed a presence behind her. She didn't need to turn. She knew. Rhett approached slowly, respectfully, leaving enough distance that she wouldn't feel cornered, but close enough to show intention. "Beautiful night," he said softly. Zaida turned, offering a composed smile. Do you come to Meridian events often?" he asked. "This is my first," she admitted. "I know," he replied gently. She blinked. "You know?" His eyes held hers. Clear, steady, sincere. "I recommended you." Zaida's breath caught. He didn't say it with arrogance or entitlement. He didn't say it as if she owed him gratitude. He said it like a truth he wanted her to have, without agenda. "Why?" she asked quietly. Rhett stepped closer, slowly, giving her time to adjust. "Not invading, just approaching. Because your mind belongs in rooms like this," he said. "And because your voice carries a kind of balance this city desperately needs." Zaida swallowed gently. Very few people had ever acknowledged her intellect with such simplicity and sincerity. She held onto the railing, steadying herself. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he replied. "I wanted to." Silence lingered. Warm, not awkward. The wind lifted a strand of her hair, and she tucked it behind her ear. Rhett's eyes followed the motion, with a softness he couldn't hide. "Zaida," he began quietly. Her heart skipped. "Being near you feels peaceful." The words landed with unexpected weight. Not romantic, not suggestive, not dramatic, meaningful. It had been a long time since anyone associated her presence with something gentle. Her marriage was full of pressure, judgment, expectations, and disappointment. Peace was something she gave others, not something she received. "Peace," she echoed softly. Rhett nodded once. "Yes, you have a grounded energy. You listen without rushing. You speak without ego. You move through spaces without trying to dominate them. And yet somehow you shape the room." Zaida looked away briefly, eyes drifting back to the city below. "I don't feel peaceful most days. That's why I said being near you feels peaceful," he replied. "Sometimes others see what we can't." She inhaled slowly, her chest warming. She didn't know how to respond. Not because she doubted him, but because the honesty touched a part of her she had buried deeply. "Rhett?" she whispered. "Yes, you see me more clearly than people I've known for years." His expression softened. "I pay attention to things others overlook." Her heart fluttered, not in the naive way of infatuation, but in the mature, quiet awakening of a woman who finally feels recognized. He took another step closer, slow, gentle, deliberate. The air between them shifted. The rooftop quieted. The city lights softened. Zaida didn't step back, didn't want to. And Rhett, he waited, letting her decide whether the space between them would close. Then, with a breath so small she barely felt it, Zaida turned fully toward him. Her eyes met his. Steady, open, vulnerable. In that moment, the city felt still, and Rhett Harrington, a man of strategy and restraint, finally let something real slip into his voice. "I've wanted to be near you for a long time." Zaida's pulse quickened, because for the first time in years, she wanted someone near her, too. Not out of loneliness, not out of fear, not out of longing for validation, but because she felt peace, the very thing he named. And standing under the DC sky, with quiet wind brushing past them, she allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt since before her marriage. Possibility. The rooftop air felt different now. Warmer despite the breeze, charged without chaos, quiet yet full of meaning. For a moment, Zaida simply stood there, letting Rhett's words settle over her, like a blanket she didn't realize she needed. She had been admired before. She had been complimented before. She had been wanted before. But this was different. Rhett's confession wasn't flashy. It wasn't performative. It wasn't meant to impress or seduce. It was honest, measured, offered gently, like something precious placed in her hands. Zaida exhaled, slow and steady, grounding herself. Rhett? He waited, patient, present, respectful. He didn't step closer. He didn't pressure her. He held absolutely still, letting her choose what happened next. That alone made her chest tighten. The choice had never been hers in her past relationship. With Caspian, everything felt rushed. Decisions, emotions, expectations, demands. Affection came with conditions. Love came with pressure. Even moments of intimacy felt like duties checked off a list. But with Rhett, nothing felt forced. Nothing felt demanded. Nothing felt expected. She lifted her eyes, meeting his gaze. The city lights reflected in them, soft, steady, unwavering. There was no hunger there, no impatience, only deep interest, and something more tender than she was prepared to recognize. She stepped toward him, just one small step. Rhett's breath shifted subtly, but he didn't reach for her. His restraint only heightened the moment, making her feel safe in a way she hadn't known she needed. Rhett, she whispered again. Yes? He answered, voice quiet, warm. Her fingers brushed his forearm. A light touch, barely there, but enough to send a ripple through both of them. He lowered his head slightly, bringing himself closer to her level without crowding her, waiting for a sign, any sign, that she wanted this too. Zaida's hand rose slowly, almost hesitantly, resting against the side of his jaw. His skin was warm beneath her palm, and the contact made her pulse flutter. Rhett closed his eyes, just briefly, not in anticipation, but in acknowledgement. She was touching him. She was choosing him. She was giving him permission to close the space between them. When he opened his eyes again, something deepened in them, a softness, a warmth, a careful desire. Her voice trembled, just slightly. I haven't done this in a long time. You're in control, he murmured. Whatever pace you choose, I follow. The words disarmed her completely. No one had ever said that to her. No one had ever offered intimacy without claiming ownership. Zaida let her thumb glide gently across his skin, then lifted her chin just a fraction, a silent invitation. Rhett moved, but not quickly, not hungrily, not possessively. He leaned in slowly, letting her feel every second of the choice they were making together. His hand rose to lightly rest against her waist, open, supportive, careful. Their lips met with the gentlest touch. Soft, unrushed, intentional. It wasn't a kiss meant to spark frenzy. It was a kiss meant to communicate something far more profound. I see you. I respect you. I want to know you, not just touch you. Zaida's breath caught softly as she leaned in, letting her fingers slide into the back of his hair. The kiss deepened just a little, slow, warm, steady, and she felt something stir inside her that she hadn't felt in years. Safety, tenderness, connection. When Rhett finally pulled back, he didn't release her waist. His forehead rested gently against hers, both of them catching their breath, both aware that something irreversible had just shifted. Zaida whispered. That felt different. So did you, he replied softly. She laughed under her breath. Small, breathless, genuine. That your way of saying it was good? He smiled slightly. No, that was my way of saying it meant something. Zaida's heart fluttered. She hadn't expected her night to turn into this. She hadn't expected her guarded heart to open even a fraction. She hadn't expected a kiss, simple, slow, respectful, to make her feel like a woman rediscovering parts of herself she thought had gone numb. When their eyes met again, the rooftop no longer felt wide and open. It felt intimate, safe, private, a space where two adults could admit, without words, that something had just begun. Something they didn't plan. Something they didn't rush. Something they both felt deeper than either of them anticipated. The kiss lingered in the air long after they stepped apart, not as a spark, but as a promise. This connection was real. This interest was mutual. This moment was the start of something neither of them could deny. The rooftop moment shifted the rhythm of the entire night, subtly but undeniably. When they walked back inside, the world around them felt quieter, dimmer, less important. They weren't clinging to each other. They weren't rushing in anything. There was no frantic energy, no impulsive touch, just closeness, a soft, shared understanding that something had changed. Zaida stayed at the event for another hour, drifting into conversations, smiling politely, answering questions, but part of her remained attuned to Rhett, sensing him in the room the way one senses warmth near a dim flame. And Rhett, he didn't hover, didn't crowd her, didn't interrupt. But every time she lifted her gaze, he wasn't far. Near enough for her to feel safe. Far enough for her to feel free. By the end of the evening, the host approached Rhett with a group of lawmakers, pulling him into conversation. Zaida slipped out quietly, needing air again. But this time, not because she felt overwhelmed. She felt anchored. She rode down the private elevator to the building's lobby, stepped outside, and let the cool night wash over her. She stood near the curb, wrapped in her shawl, her mind replaying the rooftop kiss. Not the sensation itself, though it was gentle and warm, but what it symbolized. Recognizing connection after trauma. Trusting a feeling instead of running from it. Letting a man near her heart without surrendering control. She closed her eyes, just for a moment, and breathed. When she opened them, Rhett stood a few feet away. He must have followed shortly after she left, but he hadn't rushed. He stood with his hands in his pockets, not assuming, not intruding. Zaida, he said, his tone low, steady. Her heart tugged. You found me. I wasn't looking, he replied. I was walking toward the exit, and you happened to be where my steps ended. She smiled, small, soft, touched. That's an interesting coincidence. I don't think it is, he said quietly. Silence settled for a moment, not tense, but full of awareness. Do you need a ride home? He asked. Zaida hesitated, not out of fear, but out of caution. She wanted clarity, not confusion. She wanted intention, not impulse. Are you sure that's a good idea? She asked gently. Rhett stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance. The good idea is whatever you feel comfortable with. If you'd rather go alone, I respect that completely. Her chest warmed. It wasn't the offer. It wasn't the night. It was the respect. Actually, she said slowly, a ride would be nice. A subtle relief passed across his expression, though he kept it composed. Then I'd be honored. He opened the car door for her, not out of showmanship, but genuine courtesy. The drive to her building was quiet, but not awkward. The kind of silence that felt like two people thinking about the same moment, without needing to fill the space. When they arrived at her building, Zaida turned toward him. "Would you like to come up for a little while?" she asked softly. Rhett didn't assume what she meant. He didn't smirk. He didn't lean in. He didn't let desire overshadow respect. His voice stayed calm. "Only if you genuinely want that." Her answer was gentle, honest, and certain. "I do." Upstairs, the atmosphere felt warm, not heated, not rushed. Her apartment lighting was soft. The city lights glowed through her windows. She set her shawl aside, and Rhett removed his jacket, folding it neatly over the arm of her couch. They faced each other, standing, quiet, connected. He approached slowly, letting her watch every step, giving her time to pull back if she needed to. She didn't. When he reached her, he lifted a hand to her cheek, his touch warm and steady. She leaned into it, naturally, without fear. "Zaida," he said softly, "tell me what you need from me tonight." Her breath trembled, just gentleness. "You have it," he whispered. Their second kiss was deeper than the first, but still controlled, calm, emotional, full of unspoken understanding. His hands stayed on her waist, guiding, but never gripping. Her fingers slid across his shoulders, not to claim him, but to feel supported. There was no urgency, no frantic movement, no overpowering hunger, just two adults sharing closeness after months of loneliness and years of emotional neglect. They moved toward the couch slowly, still kissing, still touching, still communicating with soft breaths and quiet murmurs. The intimacy that followed remained grounded, respectful, mutual, safe, the kind of closeness YouTube allows because it isn't graphic, but emotional. Her head resting against his chest as they talked in low voices, his thumb brushing the back of her hand in a soothing rhythm, her body relaxing for the first time in a long time, his presence offering warmth she hadn't realized she missed. Nothing rushed, nothing loud, nothing that took away her agency, just tenderness, connection, healing. When the night slowed and the city quieted, Zaida rested against him, feeling something she hadn't felt since before her marriage. Held, not controlled, not judged, not evaluated. Held as a woman worthy of care. She closed her eyes, breathing him in. Rhett didn't move, didn't push for anything more, didn't break the moment. He simply held her. And for the first time in years, Zaida allowed herself to feel comfort without guilt. The morning light slipped gently through Zaida's curtains, brushing across the living room where she and Rhett had eventually fallen asleep, still fully dressed, still holding each other, still wrapped in a quiet closeness neither of them had expected. Zaida woke first. Her head rested on his chest, her hand on his forearm, his breathing soft and steady beneath her ear. She blinked slowly, disoriented for a second, not because she regretted anything, but because she hadn't shared space with a man in such a calm, safe way in years. There was no tension, no stiffness, no emotional weight pressing down on her ribs. Just warmth, the kind of warmth that made her body relax deeper into the cushions, as if it instinctively knew this moment was not meant to be feared. She lifted her head gently, so she wouldn't disturb him. Rhett's arm tightened around her instinctively, just for a moment, before he inhaled and woke as well. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the room, then focused on her. "Good morning," he said softly, his voice low and warm. Zaida's lips curved into a small, sincere smile. "Good morning." Silence settled for a moment. Soft, natural, unforced. But beneath that quiet was a current of something unspoken, something both of them felt, but neither of them fully understood. Rhett sat up slowly, running a hand across the back of his neck. Zaida moved beside him, smoothing her dress, pushing her curls gently back. It wasn't awkward, it wasn't tense, but it held the delicate uncertainty of two people standing at a crossroads. He looked at her, not with regret, not with confusion, but with a tenderness that almost made her chest ache. "Zaida," he began carefully. She knew what was coming. She felt it before he spoke. The shift in tone, the hesitation, the awareness that the night, beautiful as it was, existed inside a fragile bubble. "We should probably be clear with each other," she said quietly, meeting him halfway. He exhaled, surprised but relieved. Yes, her fingers linked together in her lap. "Last night, it wasn't planned." "No," he agreed softly. "It wasn't. It was beautiful," she continued, voice steady and gentle and needed. "But it doesn't mean we're suddenly something defined." Rhett nodded, though something flickered in his eyes. A softness she didn't recognize yet. "I respect that. Truly." She studied him. "Do you agree?" He paused. Only for a breath. Only long enough for her to notice. Only long enough for the truth to sit between them, unspoken. "Finally," he answered, with controlled clarity. "I agree that last night should stand on its own, without pressure." Zaida nodded slowly. She appreciated that, needed that. Her heart wasn't ready for more. Her life wasn't aligned for more. Her healing wasn't structured for more. And yet, she felt more. Something soft, blossoming quietly beneath her ribs. Something that whispered instead of shouted. Something that warmed instead of burned. Rhett stood, smoothing his suit jacket, before picking it up from the back of her couch. Zaida rose as well, walking him to the door. He paused before stepping out, turning toward her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "Last night mattered," he said softly, "but I won't assume anything from it. You tell me how you want to move forward." Zaida's throat tightened, not painfully, but emotionally. "I appreciate that. I meant what I said on the rooftop," he continued gently. "Being near you feels peaceful, but I won't complicate your life. I won't intrude." Her heart fluttered again, in that quiet, unexpected way he always managed to spark. "Rhett," she whispered, "I don't regret anything." He closed his eyes briefly, a small, sincere moment of release. "Neither do I." Their gazes held, long enough to acknowledge something deeper, but short enough not to name it. He stepped back. She opened the door. He walked into the hallway with composed calm, but Zaida could feel it. The shift, the energy, the connection pulling at something inside her she wasn't ready to unravel yet. When she closed the door behind him, she leaned against it, exhaling from a place she'd forgotten existed. This wasn't love. Not yet. This wasn't a relationship. Not yet. But it wasn't nothing. It was a moment born from emotional honesty, adult need, and a shared sense of safety. Something rare and hard to define. Zaida tried to tell herself it was just that. A moment. A one-night connection. A healing pause between two people who happened to cross paths at the right time. But the truth pressed gently against her ribs. It felt like a beginning, and though she didn't know it yet, the night she thought would fade quietly into memory was the same night destiny quietly shifted the ground beneath both of them. Meanwhile, as Rhett stepped into the elevator, he let his composed expression soften the second the doors closed. He allowed himself a breath, one that carried something he couldn't quite voice. He wasn't falling. He wasn't sinking. He wasn't rushing. But he felt something. Something real. Something undeniable. Something he had no intention of dismissing, simply because caution felt easier. "Just a moment," he whispered to himself. But the faint tilt of his lips, the quiet warmth in his chest, betrayed the truth. He didn't believe that. Not for a second. And neither did fate. Zaida Morrow had lived many chapters of her life with discipline. Carefully measured steps, steady decisions, emotional restraint carefully folded into her routines. But nothing in her controlled world could have prepared her for the moment she stood in her bathroom, staring at a small digital screen that changed the course of everything she knew about herself. Pregnant, the word pulsed silently, softly, powerfully. She didn't breathe at first. She didn't move. She didn't blink. Her hand trembled, just slightly. The test feeling heavier than plastic should ever feel. She set it down on her marble counter, stepping back, as if distance would stabilize her heartbeat. She wasn't supposed to see this word. Not according to doctors. Not according to her past marriage. Not according to all the nights she lay awake crying silently into a pillow, because her body refused to give Caspian what he demanded of her. Pregnant. She pressed both hands against the cool counter, her knees weakening. A laugh, soft, breathless, stunned, escaped her lips. Then tears burned her eyes. She wasn't crying from fear or pain or overwhelm. She cried because she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility. Her body had not failed her. Her womanhood was whole. Her ability to create life had not been stolen by the cruelty of someone who blamed her for what he didn't understand. Pregnant, she whispered again, her voice barely audible. As the truth settled into her chest, her heart fluttered with disbelief. Memories of that gentle night with Rhett drifted back. His steady hands, the warmth of his embrace, the soft way he said her name as if he were afraid of hurting it. She rested a hand on her stomach, her breath unsteady. The timeline was undeniable. This was his child. Their child. Emotions collided. Shock. Sharp, but not painful. Joy. Unexpected and overwhelming. Wonder. Pure and transformative. Fear. Soft, but present. Curling around the edges. She paced slowly across her apartment, one hand still pressed against her belly. She spoke aloud to steady herself. I'm pregnant. I'm actually pregnant. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, not out of shame, but out of reverence for what this moment meant. Her body had finally spoken its truth. Her future had shifted in an instant. Her heart felt torn between soaring hope and trembling disbelief. The memories of Caspian's harsh accusations rushed forward. You're the reason we don't have a family. My legacy needs an heir. You can't give me that. Each word had cut deep. Each accusation had stitched a wound she carried in silence. Each moment had convinced her she was inadequate. But here she stood, holding the proof. He had always been wrong. A sob, quiet, grateful, escaped her lips. She sank slowly onto her couch, closing her eyes, letting the truth wash over her. She wasn't alone. She wasn't broken. She wasn't defined by the past. She carried life, a new beginning, a silent, growing heartbeat that would change everything. Zaida whispered through trembling lips, Thank you, for the first time in a very long time. She felt whole. And then, inevitably, another thought surfaced. Rhett, how would he react? What would he think? Would he believe her? Would he assume she wanted to trap him? Would he see the truth? That this was a miracle neither of them expected. A wave of uncertainty rippled through her. She wasn't afraid of him. Rhett was not a man who lived through ego or impulse, but she feared the misinterpretation, the shadow of her divorce lingering over her, the whispers of those who still believed she couldn't conceive. She clutched a pillow to her chest. I need time, she whispered. I need to process this before I tell him. But time wasn't something the universe intended to give her freely. This revelation, beautiful, fragile, would not stay hers alone for long. Zaida spent the next 2 days trying to carry on with her life, as if nothing inside her had shifted. She attended client meetings, reviewed contracts, and participated in a panel discussion on intellectual property law. She moved with her usual composure, but something quiet pulsed beneath her ribs, an awareness that every step she took for two. She placed a protective hand over her stomach more often than she realized. She caught her breath more easily. Her smiles came softer, warmer. Her emotions felt closer to the surface. Yet with joy came fear, not of motherhood, not of the physical changes, not even of public scrutiny. Her fear was focused entirely on one person, Rhett Harrington, not because she doubted him, but because she understood how the world worked. Men in power had to guard their reputations. Every decision they made was analyzed, interpreted, twisted into narratives they could not always control. And the timing worried her. They had shared only one night of closeness, a night full of tenderness, calm, emotional clarity. But still, just one night. Zaida paced her living room, holding her robe tightly around her as she replayed every scenario in her mind. What if he thinks I'm trying to trap him? What if he believes this is about his money or his status? What if he feels pressured? What if this ruins the gentle connection we've barely started building? Each question tightened a knot in her stomach. She knew Rhett wasn't like Caspian. He didn't approach life through arrogance or control. He was thoughtful, respectful, considerate. But even thoughtful men could misinterpret unexpected news when emotions ran high. Zaida sank onto her couch, covering her face with both hands. I don't want to lose him, she whispered. Not because she needed him, not because she was afraid to raise a child alone. She was more than capable of building a full, rich life by herself, but because Rhett had given her something precious, a sense of peace, a feeling of being valued, a glimpse of love that wasn't rushed or demanded. Their connection was just beginning, fragile and beautiful, like a leaf opening after winter. She didn't want this pregnancy to shatter that. She wanted to tell him at the right time, with the right words, in a moment where fear didn't drown truth. Her phone buzzed unexpectedly. Rhett Harrington. One new message. Her heart lurched. She opened it quickly. Thinking about you. Hope your week is calm. Just 12 words. Simple, gentle, genuine. Yet they wrapped around her heart like warm hands. Zaida pressed a palm against her stomach again. How do I tell him? She whispered. How do I say something that could change both of our lives? Emotion surged in her chest. Soft, aching, overwhelming. Tears filled her eyes, not from sorrow, but from the sheer weight of love forming inside her, not just for the child she carried, but for the possibility of a life she never imagined she could have. Before she could respond to his message, her phone buzzed again. Another notification, but this one wasn't from Rhett. It was a message from an unknown number. I heard. Congratulations are in order. Zaida froze. Her blood ran cold. Her breath stalled. No one was supposed to know. She hadn't told a soul, not even her closest friends, not her doctor's office, not anyone connected to her social circles. She read the message again. Congratulations. Her hands trembled. Her heart hammered. Only one person would send something like that, with such cold, clipped phrasing. Caspian. She swallowed hard as a chill rushed through her. Her miracle was no longer just hers. Then the man who once blamed her for his pain had somehow discovered she was carrying a child. Zaida stared at her phone, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. The message glared up at her, sharp as a blade in a dark room. Unknown. I heard congratulations are in order. She didn't move for several seconds. Her fingers tightened around the phone as a wave of cold dread settled beneath her ribs. She tried to steady herself, inhaling slowly the way her therapist taught her, but the calm wouldn't come. Her phone rang. The caller ID flashed. Caspian Hale. Zaida closed her eyes. Oh, of course. Her thumb hovered over decline. but she knew avoiding him wouldn't stop anything. Caspian wasn't the type of man who let things go, especially when he sensed leverage. And a pregnancy, especially this pregnancy, to him, this wasn't a child. It was a weapon. She answered. Before she could speak, his voice slid through the speaker, measured, cold, confident. Thy day, her jaw clenched. Caspian, there was a pause. He enjoyed theatrics, always had. I heard you're expecting, he said. How fortunate for you. His tone wasn't congratulatory. It was heavy with accusation, entitlement, and something even worse, gloating satisfaction. Zaida steadied her voice. How did you get this information? Caspian gave a dismissive breath. DC is smaller than you think. People talk, especially when it concerns a woman who swore up and down she couldn't give me a family. Her stomach twisted, he continued. I always suspected the problem wasn't medical. It was loyalty. Zaida's heart thudded painfully. You're out of line, Caspian. I'm being realistic, he replied. You never wanted to build anything with me. Now, suddenly, one night with him, and you're carrying a child. Her fingers tightened around the phone. This has nothing to do, though. Oh, but it does, Caspian countered. You were my wife, my household, my investment. And the city knows it. They know what you claimed, what you couldn't do. Zaida's voice went quiet. I didn't claim anything. Those doctors said. Yes, he cut in. And yet here you are, proving their diagnosis wrong in the most convenient way possible. Convenient. The word stung deeper than any insult he'd ever thrown. She was silent. He misinterpreted silence as weakness. He always did. Who's the father? He asked, though they both knew he already knew. The rivalry makes it interesting, doesn't it? Harrington will finally know what it's like to have something of mine. The air in her apartment felt heavy. Caspian, stop. No, he said. You don't get to silence me anymore, Zaida. Not when your choices reflect on me. People assume you left me and magically got pregnant. They question my judgment, my reputation. Do you know what the Hale family board is saying? She didn't care. Not anymore. But he pressed on, voice sharpening. You made me look weak. Zaida shook her head slowly. No, Caspian. You did that all by yourself. He ignored her. If the public ties your pregnancy to Harrington, it looks like I lost something valuable. It empowers him, damages me, and embarrasses the family. Do you understand the gravity? Yes, she answered. Because you're explaining how this affects you. Not once have you asked if I'm well, or how I feel, or if I'm scared or happy. Your emotions are irrelevant, he said. What matters is control. And this, he paused, is spiraling beyond yours. Zaida exhaled slowly. My life is not your campaign. My child is not your asset. Silence. A silence that meant he was recalibrating, calculating his next strike. I want a meeting, he said finally. We need to strategize. Preferably before the public gets their hands on this. Zaida almost laughed. It wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. You think I'm going to sit with you and discuss my pregnancy as if it's a PR agenda. It's not optional, Zaida. It absolutely is. He exhaled harshly. You're being emotional. She closed her eyes. You called me barren for 3 years, Caspian. You have no right to be part of any conversation about this child. She heard the shift in his breathing. Rage, thinly masked. We'll talk again, he said sharply, because whether you like it or not, people will link me to this, and I won't let you destroy everything I've worked for. The call ended. Zaida lowered the phone, slowly. Her pulse hammered, not from fear, but from clarity. This wasn't just the pregnancy. This wasn't just a new chapter. This was a line drawn sharply in the sand. Caspian Hale had weaponized her womb for years through blame. Now he wanted to weaponize it again through public perception. He would not get that chance. Not anymore. Not ever again. Caspian wasn't a man who waited. When he wanted something addressed, he forced it. And less than 24 hours after their call, he appeared at her condo building. Zaida stepped into the lobby with her tote bag in hand, heading to a client meeting, only to find Caspian standing there, hands in his pockets, eyes sharp as glass. Her breath hitched, but she didn't stop walking. He approached her immediately. Zaida, we need to talk. Now. She kept moving. I told you, there's nothing to discuss. You're carrying a child, he hissed quietly, while the entire city still remembers you as my wife. She topped slowly, not because he commanded her to, but because she refused to let him follow her outside like a storm. She turned to face him. What do you want from me, Caspian? He stepped closer, anger simmering beneath the polished veneer he presented to the world. You told me for years that you wanted a family, he said. You cried in my arms about wanting a child. You begged doctors for solutions. And now you're pregnant? Zaida steadied her posture. Yes, with him, with someone who treated me with care, she answered. His jaw flexed. And you're proud of that. You're proud of proving me wrong. Zaida's heart squeezed, but her voice stayed calm. This isn't about Bao. Everything is about me, Caspian snapped before catching himself. He lowered his voice, but the fury remained. Do you have any idea how this looks? How what looks? She challenged. That you couldn't conceive with me. His words sliced through the space between them. So you could have kids, just not mine. The blow landed. Sharp, cruel, unfiltered. Zaida inhaled slowly, refusing to let tears rise. Caspian, she said softly, you know fertility isn't a switch. It isn't controlled by timing or desire or pressure. Our marriage was full of stress, arguments, and blame. You're saying I caused this, he demanded. I'm saying, she responded, gently but firmly, that a woman's body can shut down under emotional strain. I lived in strain every day. He scoffed. Excuses? No, she said. Truth? He stepped even closer. You humiliated me, whether you meant to or not. Everyone will see that the problem was clearly you. She blinked. You just said. The problem was me getting pregnant too easily. Which one is it, Caspian? Was I infertile? Or did I hide fertility from you deliberately? His mouth opened, then closed. He couldn't answer because he wasn't here for truth. He was here to reclaim control. Zaida lifted her chin. This child is not yours. This life inside me is not connected to you. You don't get to use it for your image or your ego. I owe you nothing. Caspian's voice dropped to a low growl. You owe me the truth. I owe you peace, she said. And by peace, I mean distance. She walked past him. He grabbed her wrist, gently, but firmly enough to stop her. Zaida turned, eyes sharp. Don't, she warned. He slowly released her. Zaida. His voice softened, not out of tenderness, but out of desperation. You were mine. My wife. How did you replace me so easily? Her chest tightened, but not from longing. From closure. I didn't replace you, she said. You left me long before our marriage ended. You left every time you blamed me. Every time you belittled me. Every time you looked at me and saw nothing but what I couldn't give you. He swallowed hard. Zaida continued, voice steady as steel. You didn't lose me to Rhett Harrington. You lost me to your own choices. Caspian stared at her, silent, stunned, not because he understood her words, but because he understood he had finally lost control. Zaida took a step back. My child will grow up loved, safe, valued, and nothing you do or say will ever interfere with that. Does he even know? Caspian whispered. Not yet. Caspian shifted. The question behind his eyes was jealousy, mixed with wounded pride. He'll claim the child publicly, he said. He'll hold the power, not you. Zaida smiled softly, sad for him, not for herself. Don't need power, she said. I need peace. She turned away, walking toward the elevator. Caspian called after her one last time, voice strained, cracking at the edges. Zaida, you're carrying the child you denied me. She didn't turn back. She didn't need to. Her final words cut cleanly through the lobby air. I never denied you anything. You denied me kindness. The elevator doors closed. Caspian Hale disappeared from her view. But more importantly, he disappeared from her life's direction. For the first time since her divorce, Zaida felt free. Zaida didn't realize she had been holding her breath until the elevator began its ascent. As the doors closed between her and Caspian, a long, trembling exhale escaped her chest. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly, resting there gently as if shielding the new life inside her from the shadows of her past. You're safe, she whispered softly. We're safe. As the elevator carried her upward, something subtle but profound shifted inside her. She'd spent years shrinking herself, so Caspian wouldn't feel threatened. Years apologizing, so he wouldn't feel inadequate. Years carrying the burden of blame for something she never caused. Now, for the first time, she felt the weight lift. By the time she stepped out onto her floor, her stride had changed. There was firmness in her posture, a quiet conviction in her expression. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't vengeance. It was the peace that comes from knowing you have survived something meant to break you. She poured herself a glass of water and sat at her kitchen island, allowing the stillness of her apartment to anchor her. Outside her floor-to-ceiling windows, the city buzzed with its usual rhythm, but Zaida felt an inner calm she hadn't known in years. Her phone buzzed. Her heart tightened. But it wasn't Caspian. It was Nia, one of her closest friends and fellow attorney. Nia, lunch tomorrow. I miss your face. Zaida, absolutely. I need normal. Nia, you? Normal? Your elegance with a briefcase. Zaida smiled, despite everything. Her friends grounded her. They reminded her that she wasn't just a former wife, or a woman betrayed, or a legal mind climbing the DC ranks. She was Zaida, a woman with worth, unconnected to any man's opinion. She set her phone down and let her hand rest over her stomach again. This child would know love, laughter, security, a mother who fought for joy, a father, when she was ready to tell him, who treated her with care. She wouldn't let Caspian poison any part of that. A soft knock interrupted the quiet. Her breath caught. She approached the door carefully, using the peephole. Her shoulders relaxed. It was building security. She opened the door midway. Ms. Morrow, the guard said politely. A gentleman was downstairs earlier. He became loud when staff explained he needed permission to come up. We removed him from the premises. We're filing a report for your protection. Zaida's pulse jumped. Thank you. Truly, I appreciate it. We're here for your safety, the guard said. If he returns, he will not get past the lobby. She nodded and closed the door. Her fingers curled into the fabric of her robe. A ripple of emotion spread through her. Not fear, but certainty. Caspian had crossed a line, and she would not allow him access to her life again. She walked to her dining table, opened her laptop, and stared at the blank screen. For a moment, she hesitated. not because she doubted her decision, but because she recognized the gravity. Then she began typing, subject, legal boundaries, effective immediately to Caspian Hail. Her fingers moved with precision. This email serves as written notice that you are not permitted to contact me directly, appear at my residence, or interfere in my personal matters in any capacity. Our marriage is legally concluded. My pregnancy is not connected to you, nor will it ever be. Any further attempts to violate my privacy or approach me without consent will result in legal action. She paused, then added one final line. Do not mistake this message for emotion. This is clarity. She hit send. It felt like releasing a breath she'd been holding for years. A liberation sealed in writing. A declaration of independence. She closed her laptop gently, feeling her pulse finally steady. For the first time since she held the pregnancy test in her hands, she wasn't overwhelmed. She was determined. She made a cup of chamomile tea and carried it to her living room. The moment she sat down, a soft flutter rippled through her stomach. It was too early for movement. She knew that logically. But it felt symbolic, as if the child inside her was answering the courage she'd chosen. Zayda whispered, "You will never know what it feels like to be unwanted. Never. Not as long as I breathe." Her eyes softened. Her shoulders lowered. Her future opened. When her phone buzzed again, she braced herself only to feel her chest warm. "Rhett, I keep thinking about you. If you need anything at all, I'm here." Her breath shook, this time not with fear, but with tenderness. Rhett Harrington had no idea how much those words meant to her right now. No idea how deeply she needed the gentleness he offered, without asking for anything in return. She replied, "Zayda, thank you. I had a difficult day. Your message helped more than you know." Seconds later, he called. She hesitated, just for a heartbeat, then answered. His voice was soft, warm, and steady. "Zayda, are you okay?" She closed her eyes. "I will be. Do you want company?" he asked gently, not pushing, not assuming. She almost said yes, almost folded into the safety of his voice. But she needed to stand in this moment, alone, strong. "I'm all right tonight," she said. "But thank you for asking any time," he murmured. "You don't have to carry everything by yourself." Her throat tightened. "Good night, Rhett. Good night, Zayda." She ended the call with a soft exhale. She set her phone aside, placed a hand on her belly, and leaned back on the couch. For the first time in her adult life, she didn't feel owned. She didn't feel judged. She didn't feel broken. She felt powerful. Her past no longer controlled her. Her future no longer frightened her. Her present belonged entirely to her. Caspian Hail would never again define her story. Zayda Morrow had reclaimed her narrative, and this child would grow in the light of a woman finally free. Zayda sat in her living room long after the sun dipped behind the DC skyline, leaving streaks of navy and violet across her windows. She had spent the entire day balancing two clashing forces inside her, fear and hope. Her pregnancy was real. Her miracle was real. Yet sharing that truth with Rhett felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of losing the gentle beginning they had. Afraid he might misinterpret the timing. Afraid he would pull away before she ever had the chance to see what they could become. The stakes felt different with Rhett. He wasn't a man who demanded. He wasn't a man who bruised others with his expectations. He wasn't a man who filled silence with superiority. He was steady. He was patient. He was safe. And precisely because he was safe, she didn't want to place any pressure on him. Her phone buzzed on the table. Rhett finished meetings early. Any chance you're free? Zaida's breath caught. Her hands shook lightly as she typed, Zaida, yes, I'm home. He replied instantly, Rhett, I'll be there in 20 minutes. She pressed a hand to her chest. 20 minutes, 20 minutes, until everything in both their lives changed. She went to her room, changed into something simple. Soft knit pants, a cream blouse, hair pulled back in a neat, low bun. She didn't want glamour tonight. She wanted truth. A knock sounded at her door, right on time. Her heart jumped. She opened the door slowly. Rhett stood there, tall, composed, his presence warm even in silence. His gray coat matched the winter air, but his eyes softened the moment they met hers. Zaida, he said gently. Her throat tightened. Come in. He stepped inside, scanning her expression with quiet concern. You look thoughtful. Are you okay? She nodded, though her stomach fluttered hard. He shrugged off his coat, placing it neatly over a chair. Then he walked toward her slowly, leaving space for her to speak if she wanted to. I had a long day, she said quietly. Do you want to talk about it? Yes, I do. Her voice shook. Rhett paused, giving her his full attention. Whatever it is, I'm here. Zaida's reserve cracked. She crossed her arms instinctively, not defensively, but as if bracing herself. There's something I need to tell you, she whispered. Rhett's brow furrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but concern. Take your time. Zaida inhaled deeply. Her hands trembled, her lips parted, but the words stuck for a moment. She forced herself forward. Rhett, I'm pregnant. The silence that followed wasn't harsh. It wasn't stunned outrage. It wasn't alarm. It was quiet, deep, still, as if the entire room stopped breathing with him. Rhett didn't move. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly, but there was no anger, no confusion, just shock filtered through a softness that made her chest ache. Zaida's voice cracked. I didn't plan this. You didn't plan this. I only found out recently, and I know how it might look. The timing is unexpected, and I don't want you to feel cornered or... Zaida, he murmured. She swallowed hard, her heartbeat trembling. I just wanted to tell you because it matters. You matter. But if you need time or space or... Zaida, he repeated, stepping closer. Her breath hitched. Tears gathered behind her eyes, but she blinked them back. He stopped in front of her, lifting one hand, as if asking permission. His voice dropped to a tender, almost reverent whisper. May the first... She nodded. His hand rested lightly over her stomach. A breath escaped him. Slow, cautious, emotional. His eyes glistened, just faintly. This is real? He asked softly. Yes, she whispered. I took multiple tests. I'm scheduling an appointment. I just needed to tell you first. He didn't speak. He didn't move away. He didn't retreat emotionally or physically. He stood there holding a truth neither of them expected. And instead of being overwhelmed, he smiled, a small, grateful smile that grew slowly, warming his entire face. Zaida, he breathed. Thank you for telling me. The tears she tried to hold back spilled, not because she was afraid, but because his reaction was gentler than anything she'd prepared her heart for. Zaida covered her face for a moment, overwhelmed by emotion. Rhett immediately stepped closer, not forcefully, but with quiet reassurance. Hey, he murmured. Look at me. She lowered her hands slowly. Rhett's expression was steady, warm, almost protective. Why are you crying? He asked softly. Because I don't want you to feel obligated, she whispered, or pressured, or trapped. I don't want this to ruin what we were starting to build. Rhett exhaled gently and took her hands in his. "Zaida," he said, voice anchored with sincerity. "I don't feel trapped." Her lips trembled. "You don't?" "No." He shook his head, slowly. "I feel honored." The word hit her like a soft shock. She blinked. "Honored?" "Yes," he said, "because you shared a night with me that meant something. Because life came from that night. Because you trusted me enough to tell me." Zaida felt her knees weaken. He continued, voice deep with truth. "I'm not running. I'm not scared. I'm not thinking about public perception or political narratives." He squeezed her hands. "I'm thinking about you and this child, and how grateful I am that we're connected in this way." A tear slid down her cheek. He reached up and wiped it with his thumb, gently, reverently. "I've never wanted to trap anyone," Rhett said softly, "and I sure as hell won't let you think that this child traps me." He rested his hand lightly over her belly again. "This is a gift. Unexpected, yes, but not unwanted." Zaida's breath shook. "I didn't expect you to react this way." "How did you think I'd react?" "I thought," her voice faltered, "I thought you might feel burdened." "Zaida," he said gently, "being connected to you could never be a burden." She bit her lip, emotion shaking through her. Rhett continued, his tone earnest. "You don't have to rush anything with me. I'm not asking for a relationship before you're ready. I'm not asking for commitments or labels. I just want you to know." He paused, voice warming. "I'm here. Fully. Without hesitation." Zaida's shoulders dropped as her entire body softened. Relief washed through her like warm rain. "Rhett," he cupped her cheek tenderly. "You're not alone in this. Not even for a moment." Zaida stepped into him, slowly, like she was allowing herself to trust safety for the first time in years. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her gently, protectively. She exhaled into his chest, her eyes closing. It wasn't passion. It wasn't urgency. It wasn't the shaky closeness of two people overwhelmed. It was the kind of embrace that said, "You matter. Your heart matters. Your happiness matters. This child matters to me because they matter to you." When they finally separated, he looked at her with a softened gaze. "Tell me what you need," he said. "No expectations. Just truth." Zaida wiped her eyes and whispered, "I need support. I need calm. I need someone who doesn't see this child as a complication." Rhett nodded downs. "You have all of that with me." Her chest ached in the most beautiful way. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead. Not passionately, but with affection so deep it made her breath catch. "I'm not trapped," he murmured against her skin. "I'm grateful." Zaida knew, in that quiet moment, that her child would grow up with something she never imagined possible. A father who chose them without hesitation. A partner who valued tenderness over pride. A future that felt steady instead of stormy. Rhett stepped back, only enough to meet her eyes again. "We'll do this together," he said. "However you want. However you need." Zaida let out a trembling breath and smiled. For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, she wasn't scared. Rhett moved to the sofa and sat gently, leaving space for Zaida to join him without feeling crowded. She sat beside him slowly, still processing the warmth of his earlier words, the steadiness of his embrace. It felt surreal, almost disorienting, to be met with compassion after years of being conditioned to brace for disappointment. Rhett rested his elbows on his knees, hands clasped, as though choosing every word with care. "Zaida," he began, "before anything goes further, between us or with this child, I want to make something absolutely clear." Her heartbeat quickened, but she held his gaze. "I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything, he said softly. Not a relationship, not a label, not a storybook ending. The only thing I want is honesty and the freedom to support you in the way you're comfortable with. Her breath shook. You really aren't overwhelmed. He offered a small smile. If anything, I'm humbled. Humbled? She repeated weakly. Yes. He leaned back slightly, his expression open. Because life doesn't hand us things like this without purpose. I'm not a man who takes connection lightly. The night we shared wasn't accidental. Not to me. I didn't wake up the next day confused or regretting anything. I woke up thinking, I hope she felt safe with me. Zaida's eyes softened. He continued, voice warm and low. Finding out that night created a life. It doesn't scare me. It makes me want to be a better man. Emotion surged in her chest. He lifted a hand toward her, but paused again, waiting for her permission. She nodded, and he gently took her fingers. You're not someone I see as a temporary chapter, he said. You're someone whose presence makes the world feel calmer. That night confirmed what I already suspected. I want to know you more. I want to see what we could be, together. Zaida's eyes glistened. I don't want to rush anything. I don't want this to force us into a relationship before we're ready. Rhett shook his head. That's not what I'm asking for. I'm choosing you. Not because of responsibility or image, but because I want to. The room went still. And this child? She whispered. Rhett's expression softened in a way she'd never seen from any man before. Quiet affection, mixed with a kind of emotional courage. This child is not a complication to me. He held her hand tighter. They're a blessing I didn't expect, but I accept them with my whole heart. Zaida covered her mouth, trying to hold back fresh tears. Rhett shifted closer. Not too close, just enough for their shoulders to touch. You won't walk through this alone, he murmured. Not physically, not emotionally, not publicly. Whatever you choose, I'm in it with you. Zaida exhaled a shaky breath. Her past had taught her to be self-reliant, to brace for abandonment, to anticipate disappointment. Having someone choose her so openly, without bargaining, without conditions, without demands, felt like learning a new language. Thank you, she whispered. Rhett placed his hand lightly over her stomach again. May I say something honest? Please? He inhaled deeply. I already care about this child, and I haven't even met them yet. Her breath caught. It wasn't romantic theatrics. It wasn't a grand gesture he needed an audience for. It wasn't dramatic or rehearsed. It was real. She leaned her head onto his shoulder, her hand instinctively covering his where it rested on her belly. For several long, quiet seconds, they simply breathed together. Two people accepting what fate had woven into their lives without warning, but with unmistakable meaning. Rhett kissed the top of her head, softly. This isn't the beginning of a problem, he whispered. It's the beginning of something good. Zaida closed her eyes. For the first time since her divorce, she believed him. Comfort wrapped around them like a warm blanket, until the outside world began clawing at the edges of their peace. The next morning, Zaida woke with a rare sense of calm. She made tea, touched her stomach gently, and replayed Rhett's words in her mind. I'm honored, not trapped. I'm choosing you. I'm here. But before she could fully ease into the morning, her phone buzzed with a message from Nia. Nia, girl. Call me. Something's out. Zaida frowned and immediately dialed her. Nia answered on the first ring. Zaida, sit down. I am sitting. What's going on? It's the blogs. 2 political media outlets. They're hinting at something between you, Rhett Harrington, and Caspian. A cold ripple ran through Zaida's veins. What do you mean, hinting? Nia sighed. They posted a piece about the tension between Harrington Industries and Hale Group after that contract fallout. Now they're tying the rivalry to you. They haven't mentioned a pregnancy, thank God, but they're implying Harrington is pursuing his rival's ex-wife. Zaida closed her eyes, pressure mounting against her temples. They're saying Rhett is targeting Caspian's personal history to gain political leverage. Zaida swallowed hard. I knew the media would twist things eventually, but this is worse than I expected. Nia continued. One headline literally says, "Is Harrington weaponizing heartbreak in DC power circles?" Zaida stood abruptly. They're framing me like an asset. Like I'm being played. I know, Nia said. I wanted to warn you before you saw it on your own timeline. Zaida ended the call with gratitude, but sat there, stunned. She wasn't naive. DC thrived on speculation. But this narrative cornered her between two powerful men when her goal was to reclaim her independence. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Rhett. Rhett, you've probably seen the articles. Don't panic. I'm handling it. Zaida texted back immediately. They're twisting everything. Rhett, I know. And I won't let them drag your name into political mud. This isn't your battle. It's mine. She hesitated, then typed. Zaida, I don't want you risking your reputation because of me. His reply was instant. Rhett, you are not a risk. You are someone I protect because I care about you. Another buzz. Rhett, meet me later. We'll figure this out together. She exhaled slowly, but just as she started to calm, a notification flashed across her screen. A trending post on a major political page. Is a new power couple emerging from DC's elite? Harrington and Morrow spotted at multiple events. Her stomach twisted. Another outlet followed minutes later. Caspian Hale blindsided as ex-wife grows close to his corporate rival. And sources claim tension brewing between two billionaire titans over one woman. Zaida set her phone down, overwhelmed, not by her pregnancy, not by Rhett's reaction, but by the world trying to define her reality for them. Her heart pounded. Her mind raced. She wasn't going to let gossip dictate her life again. Not after fighting so hard to break free. But the storm was forming fast, and Zaida knew exactly what this meant. Her truth with Rhett, her child, her peace would now be tangled in a rivalry that was bigger than anything she'd ever navigated. Still, she whispered to herself, I won't be controlled this time. Not by love, not by fear, not by anyone. And for the first time, the words didn't feel like hope. They felt like power. Zaida stood in front of her living room window, watching the city move beneath her like nothing in the world had shifted. Cars crawled along M Street. People hurried in to coffee shops. Winter sun glinted off office buildings. Everything looked normal, but her world was changing faster than she could catch her breath. Her pregnancy, Rhett's unwavering support, Caspian's interference, the media storm brewing online. It was all converging at once. She pressed a hand to her stomach again, grounding herself. You're okay, she whispered softly. We're okay. Her phone buzzed. Rhett, are you home? I'm downstairs. Zaida exhaled, nervous but relieved. She buzzed him in and opened the door before he even reached her floor. When he stepped out of the elevator, she felt a wave of calm spread through her, the kind of calm she didn't know she needed until he provided it. Rhett approached her with purpose, but not intensity. There was no pressure in his stride, only steadiness. Rough morning, he asked gently. She nodded. You saw the articles? Yes, he replied, and more are coming. Zaida's heart tightened. What does that mean for us? Rhett took her hands and guided her to sit on the sofa. He sat beside her, giving her full eye contact. Means we respond with clarity, he said. not panic. You're not angry? She whispered. No, he answered, annoyed at the media. Sure, but not at you. Never at you. She brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I don't want people thinking I left Caspian for you. I don't want people turning this into a scandal. Rhett lifted her chin gently. You left Caspian because he didn't deserve you. That is a complete story on its own. His voice softened. What we are building is separate and beautiful and intentional. Her eyes warmed. And this child, he continued, placing a hand over hers, is not a scandal. They're a blessing. Anyone who tries to twist that is showing the world who they are, not who you are. Zaida's throat tightened with emotion. She leaned into him, not for protection, for partnership. He held her quietly for several moments before speaking again. Zaida, I'm choosing this future because I want it. With you, with the child, with everything that comes next. Not because of pressure, not because of expectation, because it feels right. Her lips parted slightly, and she looked at him with honest vulnerability. It feels right to me, too. His smile was warm, soft around the edges. Good. They stayed like that for a while. The city outside buzzing with noise, while their apartment held a kind of quiet truth. Eventually, Rhett spoke again, voice gentle. Before we go any further, I want you to tell me what you want. Zaida took a slow breath. I want peace. I want a healthy pregnancy. I want honesty from both of us. And I want a chance to see what we could become. Rhett brushed her hand with his thumb. Then that's exactly what we'll do. He stood slowly and walked to the window, studying the city as though calculating the next steps. The media attention is only the beginning, he said. Once they link the rivalry with your name, they'll circle like sharks. They'll want narratives about betrayal, politics, power. Zaida's stomach tightened. I'm not cut out for that kind of spotlight. Rhett turned to her. You won't be facing it alone. He crossed the room, knelt in front of her, and took both of her hands. Zaida, I'm protecting you. Not because you're fragile, but because you deserve someone who stands with you, not someone who uses you. Her eyes glossed with tears. She touched his face gently. Thank you. He kissed her knuckles. Then he stood and offered his hand. Let's take this one step at a time, starting with truth, starting with us, starting with hope instead of fear. Zaida rose to her feet and allowed herself to step into his arms. Her voice was soft but sure. I want that future with you. Then it's ours, he said. She rested her forehead against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, a rhythm that grounded her more than anything else had in years. Rhett whispered, You're not alone in this chapter, Zaida. I'm right here, through all of it. Her breath stilled for a moment as she absorbed the depth of his promise. He wasn't saving her. He wasn't taking over her battles. He wasn't making decisions for her. He was standing beside her. That was the difference. That was what made this real. That was what separated him from every man she had ever known. And for the first time in her adult life, she didn't feel overshadowed. She felt supported. She felt chosen. She felt strong. Fatal embrace family. Tell me your favorite moment so far in the story. Was it Rhett choosing Zaida without hesitation? Her standing up to Caspian? Or the moment she realized she wasn't alone anymore? Drop your favorite part in the comments. It helps the story reach more amazing viewers like you. Zaida had rehearsed this moment in her mind a dozen times. The moment when her worlds would meet. Her family wasn't just loving. They were discerning, protective, deeply rooted in culture and education. They valued integrity above charm, character above wealth, and emotional intelligence above power. That meant Rhett Harrington, billionaire heir and polished corporate strategist, was about to walk into a living room full of minds that could read a person within seconds. The moment Zaida told her mother she wanted them to meet someone, the excitement in her voice was immediate. You don't introduce us to just anyone, baby. So bring him. We'll cook, which of course meant a full spread. Baked chicken seasoned with love, collard greens, cornbread fresh out of the oven, and her father's specialty, lemon pepper salmon that could make anyone reconsider their life choices. Zaida stood in her parents' elegant Silver Spring home, smoothing her blouse for the 5th time. Her mother watched, with amusement. Relax, her mother said. He must be important. If you're fidgeting, like you're about to defend a thesis. Zaida swallowed. He is important. Before her mother could ask anything else, the doorbell rang. Her father opened the door, and Rhett stepped inside. And instantly, the room shifted. Not with tension, but with quiet curiosity. Rhett removed his coat politely. Good evening, Mr. Morrow. Thank you for having me. Her father studied him for a full 3 seconds, long enough to test the resolve of most men. Rhett didn't flinch, didn't overextend, didn't attempt false confidence. Finally, her father nodded. Welcome, son. We don't bite. Zaida let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Her mother approached next. Elegant, sharp-eyed, warm when she wanted to be. You must be Rhett. I've heard very selective things about you. Zaida blushed. Mom. Rhett smiled gently. Selective is good. I hope everything else is earned over time. Her mother lifted an eyebrow, impressed. Dinner began with light conversation. Her siblings trickled in, adding laughter, commentary, and questions that would intimidate any man not secure in himself. What do you do for fun, Rhett? Are you planning to stay in D.C. long term? Do you cook, or are you strictly restaurant dependent? He handled each question with humility, humor, and honesty. He didn't brag about his influence. He didn't lean on the Harrington name. He didn't dominate the conversation or shrink back. He simply fit. At one point, her father asked directly, "What do you see in our daughter?" Zaida froze. Rhett didn't. He looked over at her, slow, gentle, then answered. She has a mind I respect, a heart I admire, and a strength I want to learn from. Being near her makes life feel grounded, and I want to support her in ways that never take from her independence. Her mother's face softened immediately. Her father sat back, satisfied. Her siblings exchanged knowing looks. Zaida felt her heart swell. After dinner, while her family gathered in the kitchen, her mother pulled her aside and whispered, "He's different. I can see that. If this is the man connected to your child, you'll be all right." For the first time in a long time, Zaida truly believed that. 2 days later, it was Zaida's turn to enter Rhett's world, a world she had only observed from a polite distance at events and galas. Harrington Tower stood tall in downtown D.C. Sleek, efficient, beautiful, without being gaudy. It wasn't designed to flaunt wealth. It projected precision. Everything about it represented choice, discipline, and control. Rhett met her in the lobby wearing a midnight gray suit, his presence subtly commanding, though he greeted her with warmth, reserved only for her. "You ready?" he asked. She exhaled, "As I'll ever be." The elevator ride to the top floor was smooth, silent, almost intimidating, with its mirrored walls and soft lighting. Zaida's reflection showed a confident woman, but she knew her heart was beating much faster than her expression revealed. The doors opened to an office spread that could rival any West Coast tech giant. Glass walls, collaborative spaces, modern art, every detail curated. Rhett placed a guiding hand on her back. Not possessive, simply reassuring. "These are people I trust," he said, "and I want them to meet the woman who's become important to me." The introduction phase began. His chief strategy officer shook her hand. His legal counsel, a woman in her 40s with sharp wit, immediately admired Zaida's reputation as a corporate attorney. His operations director nodded respectfully, as if he'd heard more about her than he was allowed to say. No one treated her like an accessory, No one reduced her to Caspian's ex. No one questioned her presence. In Rhett's world, she wasn't a scandal. She was a partner. He led her into his private office, which overlooked the entire city. It wasn't cold or overly masculine. It felt warm, lived in, filled with books, framed architecture sketches, and a small plant she suspected he watered himself. "This is where I spend too much of my time," he joked. Zeta walked toward the window, admiring the panoramic view. "It's beautiful." He stepped behind her, close enough to feel his presence, but not crowd her. "I want you to know," he said quietly, "that you fit in this world, not because of me or because of the child, but because you're powerful in your own right." She turned toward him, emotion pulling at her features. "You really believe that?" He nodded. "I don't say things I don't mean." She stepped closer. "Rhett, thank you." "For what?" "For showing me a version of love that doesn't demand I shrink." He reached out, gently brushing her jawline with his thumb. "You never have to shrink with me." They shared a moment. Quiet, magnetic, intimate, but not rushed. This was what she had been missing. Connection that built her rather than drained her. Just as Rhett leaned in to kiss her, a knock interrupted them. His assistant opened the door slightly. "Sir, Hale Group just called. They want a meeting today." Zaida stiffened. Rhett's jaw tightened. "Tell them no," he said calmly. "But they insisted." "Tell them," Rhett repeated. "I'm unavailable." His assistant nodded and left. Zaida exhaled slowly. "He's not giving up." "No," Rhett said, turning back to her. "But neither am I." He pulled her into his arms, resting his forehead gently against hers. "You're not alone in this world," he whispered. "Not anymore." The days that followed felt like a new season in Zaida's life, a gentle shift from fear to trust, from uncertainty to clarity. Rhett didn't overwhelm her with grand gestures or unnecessary declarations. Instead, he showed up with consistency, quietly, intentionally. On Tuesday evening, he arrived at her apartment carrying 2 bags, not from a luxury restaurant, but from a small Ethiopian spot she'd mentioned once in passing. Zaida blinked. "How did you even remember that?" He smiled. "You said the injera tasted like the one your grandmother made. I pay attention." They sat on her living room floor instead of the dining table, sharing the platter, laughing over the spongy bread tearing unevenly in his hands. "You're terrible at this," she teased. "I'm improving," he protested. "You're not," she corrected, laughing softly. It felt good to laugh again. It felt even better to laugh with him. Later, when the dishes were cleared, he helped her settle on the sofa, placing a pillow behind her lower back with gentle, thoughtful precision. "You don't have to fuss," she teased. "Yes, I do," he said, with a smile. "I have a vested interest in your comfort." He placed a hand over her belly. The gesture wasn't possessive. It was reverent. "Tell me if you ever need anything," he murmured. She covered his hand with hers. "Right now, I just need this moment." He leaned in closer, brushing his nose lightly against her temple. "You have it. You'll always have my time." Another night, they took a slow walk through Navy Yard along the water, the breeze cool against their cheeks. He kept his hand at the small of her back, subtle but protective. "Does the walk feel okay?" he asked. "Perfect," she replied. They talked about childhood memories, favorite teachers, music they loved, fears they hid, dreams they still had. Not once did he try to lead the conversation back to Caspian or the media. He let her define their world, their pace, their connection. At one point, she stopped near the railing, watching lights shimmer on the river's surface. "Rhett," she said softly. "Yes, this feels new, but also familiar, like I've known you longer than I have." He stepped behind her, his hands lightly brushing her arms. Some people enter your life gently, he said, but still manage to change everything. She turned toward him. Their eyes met, steady, warm, open. His voice dipped to a whisper. If you want us to slow down, we will. If you want us to grow, we will. If you want space, I'll give it. If you want closeness, you'll always have it. Her heart fluttered, not with nerves, but with recognition. Stay close, she whispered back. He gave a single nod, lowering his forehead to hers. Always. They kissed, slow, intentional, soft, not rushed or hungry. A kiss made for two people who wanted to build, not escape. A kiss that wasn't about passion alone, but about choosing each other. A whisper followed against her lips. We're building something real, Zaida. And I'm not going anywhere. She believed him for the first time. She truly believed in a future again. Peace lasted 4 days. 4 whole days before Caspian Hale decided he couldn't stand the idea of losing his narrative, losing control, or losing face. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, just as Zaida finished reviewing a client strategy memo. Her phone buzzed repeatedly. Calls from an unknown number. She ignored them. Then a text appeared. I'm outside your building. We're talking today. Caspian. Zaida's stomach tightened. She typed quickly. Leave now. You have no right to be here. He responded instantly. You don't get to dismiss me. Not when my reputation is tied to your choices. Before she could reply, another text came through. If you won't come down, I'll wait. Zaida's heart thudded. She knew where this was headed, and she refused to be intimidated. Her next call was to security. Ms. Morrow, they confirmed. He tried to enter earlier. We stopped him. Do you want him trespassed? Yes, she said, immediately. But Caspian, stubborn, entitled, spiraling from a loss of control he'd never experienced, didn't leave. He waited outside the entrance, like a man trying to reclaim a story, already ending. Then something happened he didn't expect. A sleek, black SUV pulled up beside him. Rhett stepped out, not rushed, not heated, not dramatic, just calm, determined, certain. Zaida watched from her window, breath caught in her throat. Caspian squared his shoulders when Rhett approached. The rivalry between them electrified the air. 2 powerful men, 2 elite worlds, 2 agendas colliding on the sidewalk. Caspian spoke first. Come to collect what's left of her dignity. Rhett didn't blink. I came because you don't listen. She's carrying a child that should have been mine. Rhett's jaw tightened, but he didn't raise his voice. You don't get to rewrite biology, or history, or her autonomy. Caspian scoffed. You think she actually wants you? She chose me. Once. She'll regret this phase of hers. This isn't a phase, Rhett replied. It's freedom. Caspian stepped closer. You're interfering with my legacy. No, Rhett said, taking a step forward of his own. You interfered with her peace. You interfered with her confidence. You interfered with her life. But that ends now. Caspian's mask cracked. Not fully, but enough to show insecurity beneath the arrogance. You think you've won something? Rhett shook his head slowly. I'm not competing for her. She's not a prize. She's a woman who finally sees her worth. You lost her because you never valued it. Zaida felt tears form behind her eyes. No one had ever defended her like that. With clarity, respect, and boundary setting instead of ego. Caspian spat. She'll realize you're using her to hurt me. Rhett's voice was quiet. The kind of quiet that carries more threat than shouting ever could. The only person who ever hurt Zaida is you. Security approached. Sir, "You're trespassing. You need to leave." Caspian stared at Rhett one final time. Fury simmering, pride bleeding, power slipping. "This isn't over," he muttered. "Yes," Rhett replied, stepping between him and the building entrance. "It is." Security escorted Caspian off the property. Rhett watched him leave, then looked up. Straight to Zaida's window. She exhaled. Relief, gratitude, emotion swirling together. A text buzzed on her phone. "Rhett, I'm coming upstairs." Her hand covered her heart. For the first time in her life, she wasn't fighting her battles alone. The moment security escorted Caspian off the property, Zaida felt her lungs release a breath she didn't know she was holding. But the relief wasn't pure. It came mixed with dread, because Caspian wasn't the only threat. The media storm that had been building quietly was now shifting into a full-force gale. Rhett reached her apartment. Minutes later, she opened the door before he could knock. His presence filled the room instantly. Calm, grounded, steady. "Are you okay?" he asked. Zaida nodded. "I am now. Thank you." He cupped her cheek softly. "You never have to thank me for protecting you." But even as he said it, her phone buzzed. Then again. And again. She looked at the screen and felt her stomach drop. Political insider. Harrington confronts Hale outside ex-wife's residence. Tension escalates. Another headline. Billionaire feud turns personal. Harrington and Hale clash over Zaida Morrow. And then the one that made her freeze. Harrington steals Hale's ex-wife. Her heart slammed painfully against her ribs. "Rhett," she whispered, turning the phone toward him. He took the device, scanning the articles with narrowed eyes. His jaw tightened, not from anger at her, but from protective instinct. He handed the phone back gently. "They're trying to bait a narrative. They don't have facts, so they're creating chaos." Zaida shook her head. "People believe headlines before truth. They're going to twist this into a scandal." "They can try," he said simply. She walked toward the window, pressing a palm to the glass. Cars, pedestrians, ordinary life continued outside, unaware of how everything inside her was shifting. "I don't want my name used like some kind of trophy," she whispered. "I don't want our connection turned into a headline war." Rhett stepped behind her, not touching yet, just close enough that she could feel his warmth, his reassurance. "You won't be reduced to a story they can profit from," he said quietly. "You are not a pawn. You are not a scandal. And anyone trying to force that angle will be met with consequences." Zaida turned toward him, eyes glistening. "This is going to get worse before it gets better, isn't it?" Rhett didn't lie. He didn't soften the truth. "Yes," he said, "but so will we." She inhaled shakily. "Caspian will use this to rebuild his reputation." "He already tried," Rhett reminded her, "and I shut it down. He has no access to you, no leverage, no credibility. And after today, everyone who matters knows that. That doesn't mean the media will stop." Rhett stepped closer, sliding a gentle hand over her waist, the lightest protective touch. "They don't run your life," he said. "You do." Zaida let out a trembling breath, absorbing his calm like oxygen. Rhett had a way of steadying the chaos without dismissing her emotions. He didn't silence her worry. He helped carry it. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a recorded clip trending online, Caspian shouting, Rhett standing between him and the building, security stepping in, flashes from phones and cameras capturing everything. In the video, a reporter shouted, "Mr. Harrington, are you in a relationship with Zaida Morrow?" Rhett didn't answer. He didn't take the bait. He simply stepped into the SUV and shut the door. But the silence only fueled speculation. Below the video, comments spiraled. Hale must be furious. Harrington definitely has feelings for her. Zaida Morrow is at the center of this billionaire conflict. She left Hale for his rival. Scandalous. She's leveling up. Good for her. This is going to blow up. Zaida lowered the phone, her chest tight. I don't want strangers speaking about me like I'm an object being fought over. Rhett reached for both her hands. Look at me, he whispered. She did. His voice was calm, anchored, confident. You are not a headline. You are not a rumor. You are a brilliant attorney, a woman with strength I respect, and someone carrying a child I already care about deeply. Her throat tightened. I won't let anyone weaponize your name. Not Caspian. Not the media. Not the political commentators who need chaos for clicks. Zaida swallowed hard. What if they come after you because of me? Let them, he said without hesitation. I don't build my life around fear. I build it around truth. She exhaled slowly. You're so calm because I'm certain of something. Certain of what? She whispered. He brushed her cheek with his thumb. Tender, slow, grounding. Certain that you and I are choosing each other. And when two people choose each other, the world doesn't get to choose the story. Zaida's eyes softened, emotion swelling. Rhett, he stepped closer. We're going to navigate this together. Not as rivals, not as scandal pieces, but as two adults building something real. She rested her forehead against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her carefully, protectively. Outside, headlines kept spinning. Inside, peace settled like a quiet decision. Zaida whispered, I'm scared of the world, but I'm not scared with you. Rhett kissed the side of her head. That's all that matters. The last months of Zaida's pregnancy arrived quietly, not with drama, but with a steadiness she had never known in her adult life. She moved slower now, softer, but stronger, in a way that surprised even her. Morning meetings at the firm shifted to afternoons. Her steps down the marble hallways of her office building were measured, confident, carrying a new kind of purpose. Rhett became a near constant presence, not in a possessive way, but in the way a man shows up when he believes the woman before him is worth showing up for. He attended every appointment, sometimes in a suit straight from a board meeting, sometimes in a simple sweater that softened his usual corporate edge. Nurses smiled every time he placed a quiet hand on the small of Zaida's back, guiding her gently. At home, Rhett learned her rhythms, which teas eased her nausea, which foods she suddenly hated, which songs calmed her when the headlines spiked again. He never rushed her emotions, never minimized them. He simply held space for her, like peace turning into a person. One evening, as they sat on the terrace of his Arlington penthouse, the city lights reflecting off her growing belly, Zaida whispered, I didn't think I'd ever feel joy like this again. Rhett turned his chair to face her fully. You didn't lose the ability to feel joy. Someone just convinced you that you didn't deserve it. Her eyes softened, shimmering with a mixture of gratitude and quiet heartbreak. You've helped me rebuild more than I can name, she said. My confidence, my identity, my hope. Rhett reached for her hand. You rebuilt yourself. I just stood beside you while you remembered who you were. Nights were gentle and warm. They cooked together, or tried to, because Rhett's attempts at chopping vegetables often made her laugh until she cried. They took slow walks by the Navy Yard waterfront, Rhett keeping her close whenever curious eyes lingered a little too long. But beneath the sweetness was growth, real, grounded growth. Zaida learned to trust again. Rhett learned to soften without losing his edge. Together, they built a quiet foundation made of mutual respect and adult love. As her due date approached, her parents visited more often. Rhett grew more comfortable with their presence until her father finally said one evening, You take care of her like she's priceless. Rhett answered with no hesitation. She is. Zaida's smile that night could have lit the entire district. The closer she came to motherhood, the deeper her healing grew. She began speaking openly about her past with Caspian, not in bitterness, but as a woman reclaiming her narrative. She even met with a therapist who helped her unravel years of being diminished by someone who weaponized her vulnerability. Pregnancy, instead of weakening her, became her rebirth. Her glow wasn't fabricated. It wasn't for Instagram. It came from standing firmly in a life she chose, not one forced upon her. Every time Rhett placed his ear against her belly to listen for kicks, something within her stitched itself back together. This was a family built in truth, not performance, not expectation, not pressure. Love bloomed organically, quietly, without theatrics, which made it all the more profound. The gala was held at the Grand Meridian, one of DC's most prestigious event spaces. Only the most influential policymakers, executives, and philanthropists made the list. Zaida arrived on Rhett's arm, wearing a custom emerald gown that made the entire room freeze. Her pregnancy was now unmistakable. Her confidence was uncakeable. Cameras clicked instantly. Whispers traveled faster than the music. Is that Zaida Morrow? She looks stunning. Wait, she's with Harrington. Caspian is going to lose. Rhett stood beside her calmly, guiding her through the ballroom with quiet confidence. He didn't announce anything. He didn't flaunt her. He simply walked with her, as though the two of them were a natural, dignified pair. But the room shifted the moment Caspian entered. He stopped at the sight of her. His jaw tensed. His date looked confused. Zaida kept her posture regal. She owed him nothing. Caspian moved toward them quickly, ignoring the eyes following his every step. His voice came out sharper than he intended. So this is what you've become, Zaida. A statement piece for your lover's rivalry. Rhett stepped forward before she could speak. Choose your next words carefully. But Caspian wasn't here for careful. The cameras circled. The air thickened. The confrontation everyone silently anticipated was now unfolding. Caspian scoffed loudly. Did he tell you she was infertile when I was with her? Gasps erupted. Phones lifted. Zaida froze, breath short. The humiliation he attempted had been crafted with precision. But Rhett didn't flinch. He placed a hand on her lower back. Supportive, public, unafraid. His voice was controlled, steady, devastatingly calm. She was never the problem. She simply needed a man who didn't treat her like an investment. Silence cracked through the ballroom. Someone near the stage whispered, "Oh my God." Caspian's face flushed with pure embarrassment. Rhett continued, and for the record, you didn't lose her to me. You lost her to your own arrogance. Security began inching closer. Zaida finally found her voice, strong and unwavering. My worth was never tied to your approval, Caspian. Not then. Not now. Not ever. Caspian's date stepped back, clearly wanting no part of the spectacle. The cameras captured every teed. Reporters would replay this exchange for weeks. Rhett placed his hand in Zaida's gently. "Let's go," he murmured. But before they could step away, Zaida's body tensed. A wave of sharp discomfort rolled through her abdomen. "Rhett, wait." He immediately caught her arm. "Well, wrong." Another pain shot through her. Her breath hitched. Something isn't right. Rhett signaled security. "Clear a path. She needs medical attention." Whispers erupted again, this time filled with concern. "Is she going into labor? She looks pale. Call 911. Rhett lifted her hand to his chest. "I've got you. I'm not leaving your side." And as the crowd parted, the gala that began with whispers and confrontation ended with urgency and fear. but also with the sight of a man determined to protect the woman he loved. Rhett rushed her out of the ballroom, one arm securely around her waist. The valet sprinted to bring the car forward. Zaida clutched his hand, inhaling sharply as another contraction built. Rhett, it's too early. I know, he said, voice steady, but our daughter doesn't follow anyone's timeline but her own. She let out a weak laugh between pain. Of course she takes after you. He kissed her forehead. She takes after the strongest woman I know. They reached the hospital in minutes. Rhett practically lifted her from the car as nurses rushed forward with a wheelchair. Ma'am, how far along are you? 36 weeks, Zaida managed. Did anything stressful happen before this? The nurse asked while pushing her through the sliding doors. Zaida's eyes flicked to Rhett. He answered for her. Yes, there was a confrontation. The nurse nodded, as if that explained everything. Stress can trigger early labor. You're in the right place. They checked her vitals quickly. Rhett never let go of her hand. When the doctor arrived, he said, You're progressing faster than expected. It's early, but not dangerously early. We're moving you to delivery. Zaida breathed through another contraction. Gripping Rhett's hand so tightly, he felt his fingers go numb, but he welcomed the pain. I'm right here, he whispered. Every breath, every second. I'm here. When they reached the delivery room, Zaida looked up at him, exhausted and scared. Rhett, what if something goes wrong? He cupped her cheek, voice low, but unwavering. Nothing will happen to you. Nothing will happen to her. I'm here. I'm not leaving. Her breathing steadied. Her fear softened because he meant it, every word. For the next hours, Rhett stayed with her through every contraction. He wiped her forehead, held her hand, counted breaths with her, whispered encouragements, and kept her grounded. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense, but it was the most intimate moment of their lives. At one point, when the pain became overwhelming, Zaida cried, I can't. You can, he whispered. You already have. You've survived more than anyone knows, and you'll bring our daughter into this world with the strength that's always been in you. Her eyes filled with tears, not just from pain, but from the sheer magnitude of being fully supported for the first time in years. The doctor eventually said, Zaida, it's time. One more push. She squeezed Rhett's hand. I need you with me, she whispered. I'm here. Look at me. She pushed, and the room filled with the sound of new life. A tiny cry, raw, real, powerful. Zaida broke into sobs of relief. Rhett exhaled shakily, pressing his forehead to hers. She's here, he whispered, voice breaking for the first time in his adult life. You did it. You brought our daughter here. The nurse placed the newborn in Zaida's arms. She stared down at the tiny face, the round cheeks, the small hands curled into fists. She's beautiful, Zaida whispered. Rhett couldn't speak at first. His throat tightened, his vision blurred. He took a slow breath, then another, but the emotions surged through him faster than he could control. Rhett? She asked, softly. He covered his mouth for a moment, turning away slightly. Not out of shame, but because the emotion hit him with a force he wasn't prepared for. His voice came out rough. I've never felt something like this. Zaida reached for his hand. He lets her pull him closer. The baby whimpered. Rhett leaned in and brushed one trembling finger along her cheek. She's perfect. A tear fell. Then another. Zaida smiled gently. You're allowed to feel this. Rhett swallowed hard. I never thought I'd have a family. I never thought I'd deserve one. Zayda looked up at him, eyes soft. You didn't deserve pain. You didn't deserve loneliness. You deserve this, all of it. He kissed her forehead, then kissed the babies. I will protect you both, always. Zayda rested the baby in his arms. His breath hitched as the tiny weight settled against his chest. You're holding her like she's the whole world, Zayda whispered. Rhett gave a shaky laugh. She is. The room felt still, as though time paused to honor the moment. This wasn't about power. This wasn't about rivalry. This wasn't about headlines. It was about a man who finally allowed himself to feel love without fear, and a woman who finally realized her worth was never diminished, only buried. Now it shined openly. When Zayda was moved to recovery, Rhett sat beside her bed, their daughter sleeping in his arms. Her parents arrived soon after, emotions overflowing but controlled with dignity. Her father placed a hand on Rhett's shoulder. You stood by her when it mattered most. Rhett nodded. I'll spend my life standing by her. Zayda smiled, tired but glowing. Later that night, while the baby slept in the clear bassinet beside them, Rhett took Zayda's hand and whispered, You redefined strength. You redefined love. But most of all, you redefined your worth. Zayda looked at him with calm certainty. No one will ever decide my value again. He leaned down and kissed her. Slow, grateful, intentional. The chapter closed, not with chaos, but with peace, earned through hardship, dignity reclaimed, and love built on truth. Fatal Embrace family. If you felt every moment of Zayda's journey, drop worth more than words in the comments right now. Don't forget to like this story. Share it so others can feel this message, and subscribe so you never miss another emotional thriller like this. Your support pushes these stories to more amazing viewers. Thank you, and a lesson for us all. Your worth is not defined by someone's impatience, not by their accusations, not by their inability to see your light. Sometimes the life you deserved waits just beyond the heartbreak you feared would break you. Sometimes love grows in the places you never planned. And sometimes redemption arrives in the form of a child who proves every cruel word wrong. You are worth more than anyone ever tried to convince you to settle for.